So we got ourselves GSL Group B. This is the one with 2 Protosses, a Zerg, and a Terran. The first preliminary match is going to be a ZVP between this guy Dark and this guy Stats. First map on hard lead. So as we know, Protoss has been having kind of a tough time. And basically, there are 3 people who are kind of showing the way that Protoss should be maybe played. And those people are Hero, who's very much hit or miss. So you could kind of argue, is he really the one you want to be looking at? There's Classic, who was in this group, who actually didn't make it into Katowice. So even though he's considered one of the best Protosses, he did miss out on a very important tournament. And then there's MaxPax, who we know doesn't go to offline tournaments. So very hard to kind of truly put him in that position, right? They don't break my auto setup. But anyway, so those are the 3 that basically people talk about. And then Classic wasn't really talked about a whole lot because he missed out in Katowice. But he is in this group. MaxPax is not, obviously. And then the other Protoss that you would think would be in those group of people discussed about would be Stats, because many people remember him from his heyday, from before he went to military, when he was the best Protoss in the world, actually. And his style of play was decidedly defensive. The Shield of Ire was his nickname, which is a pretty freaking cool nickname. But it's a really hard nickname to live up to when you come back from the military, especially, because whereas Hero, I think, obviously, was just very, very good coming back, and that was surprising no matter what. I do think that if you had to guess who would do better coming back from military, you would guess it was the erratic, all-in-y, aggressive Protoss who could punch above his weight as he got back into shape. Stats, being a very defensive macro guy, feels like the hardest type of player to actually believe in as far as getting back to their old level. Even though the age isn't so much a factor, especially if they really weren't well known, I suppose, for their high APM, and they don't have, wrist issues or anything like that. There is nonetheless something about going away for 18 months and not being able to play every single day that does impact people pretty drastically, right? And it's not insane to think of, but we do have examples of people who, seemingly didn't even affect them, and then people who seemingly were very affected. So anyways, this is a long story to say that Stats is basically the defensive Protoss that he always was, and it's going to be hard to actually believe that he gets through a group like this when you have the likes of Dark, the first guy that he's facing, being that championship contender, that GSL champion contender, as well as a super aggressive, definitely can punch above his weight multiple times. If people are even above his weight, in general, he's one of the favorites to win any tournament. So, seems like a very difficult first matchup. As far as the other guys, Classic, I would believe, is just better suited to maybe a PvP if that happens against Stats. Although Stats' PvP actually was pretty solid. That was the first time that I was like, okay, maybe Stats isn't so rusty. And then there's Bunny. And Bunny, I think, is actually definitely beatable. Stats showed some good PvT at Katowice, but he also can be a little risk-taking, aggressive, cheesy sometimes, which again might be more difficult to take care of as you're trying to perfect the defense. But that said, I guess I pretty much give Stats very little chance against Dark, and then maybe some chance to actually get out of this group, which I'm sure a lot of old Stats fans will be very happy about. But against Dark, that's going to be extremely difficult. So far, we do have a totally normal macro game. No one cheesing, no one doing anything particular. No, not really. 3 Oracles coming out from Stats after the production of 3 Adepts. 2 on the front, 1 at home. Or 2 could be on the front, I should say. Both Adepts also back at that 3rd base, so not going to try and combine forces like you might see a MaxPax do. Or, I guess, build up even more Adepts and then try and go for kind of like a sneaky Adept attack alongside the Oracles, like maybe a Hero would throw it every once in a while. Nope, everything is back at home defending against any odd amount of Lings running by, which Dark could do. But Dark isn't. Just 8 Lings to guard against any offensive Adepts, and then otherwise trying to defend against these pesky Oracles. 3 of them now in play. 1 of them very, very injured, already getting 2 drones, and the other 2, well, still flying around trying to find some weak point. There really isn't too big of one. We got a lair on the way. And a, ooh, Overlord speed instantly as well. Could we have some type of queen drop coming in? Possibly. Possibly. Stats of the Shield of Ire, who is the Spear of Adun. That would almost always go to hero, but I don't think anyone's really pushed that nickname. Perhaps we should, but we haven't. Oh my goodness. Ling, Baneling, Queen. Alright then. Dark is going to do what Dark does best, and that's just rip someone's throat right out of there. No mercy whatsoever. Stats, has he picked up on this at all? He's going into Blink currently. He hasn't been particularly greedy. Well, he hasn't produced a lot of units. Well, no, actually already up to 7 stalkers. Yeah, he really hasn't been particularly greedy. In fact, that's a decent number of units. 5 gateways as well. I was going to say, you know, he hasn't gone for a robo plus a forge, trying to get all the macro stuff in. He actually has gone and had skipped that, so his production is kind of okay, but this is one of the worst possible situations. Trying to actually catch something on the outskirts of his base without Blink being available means, well, if this was 15 lings, it's probably fine. If it's 30 lings and queens and an all-in and he had no idea was on the way, it's really not fine. So this is just an unfortunate scenario. Because otherwise, I think Stats going for what looked to be his own Stalker aggression actually was a very good thing. He just had to get a whiff of this incoming attack to have his Stalkers better positioned. Now he is back up to 8 Stalkers. Shield batteries finally finishing. 5 shield batteries finishing, actually, as Stats is just banking money right now. And Dark is a little low on those lings, man. They might have taken out quite a few Stalkers, but of course they lost their lives as well. The shield batteries will not only provide that shield regen, but also a little Sim City. Baneling got the bust through that first for actually reaching the Stalkers, and Banelings aren't particularly effective against Stalkers. They do want to find them all types of clumped up, but actually beautiful positioning here from Stats to make sure that the lings are got us around, and the Banelings really couldn't hit the heart of the army either. Queen's hardly something to mention, honestly, when it comes to defeating Stalkers specifically. And I mean, we actually got back up to a critical mass, honestly. Stats initially looking like he had, you know, no idea this was on the way too far forward, completely surrounded, loses the Stalkers, doesn't get overwhelmed. Still manages to buy enough time by pulling those Stalkers back and back and back and taking at least the best possible fight around these minerals to provide him that time to build up his Stalker counts and his shield battery count. I mean, this is what he used to be known for, making these, not impossible defenses, but making these defenses work. Because again, his setup was probably one of the better ones you could have against this. It just was, his positioning was terrible. So I guess the setup still ended up working out, and thankfully no other huge mistakes like a supply block at the exact wrong time. Now, this does mean that both parties are kind of tech lights. Dark didn't go for upgrades. Stats didn't go for upgrades. Dark's adding on Hydras, yes, and Stats apparently is adding on Resident Glaive, so we have some technology coming in here. But certainly, no one was really planning on a full 100% macro game. No one's going to attack each other, right? Particularly, you know, Stats should not predict that from Dark. Dark is an attacker. Dark is an aggressor. Dark could have predicted that from Stats and probably did, which is why he did the all-in. But Stats is actually going for a 5-gate forgeless pressure build, shall we call it. And that gave him a better start. And some alternatives. Now he's able to get the Templar Archives. He's getting to his +1 attack much faster. Obviously, he can chrono it as well. Let's see if he goes into Storm immediately. It does seem like he's actually holding on to the mineral, the gas for Storm. Yeah, and there it is. So the Ling actually got a scout on that, and actually a kind of important scout, I would say. Just because if you see them merging into Archons, it might increase the chances of them just trying to go for an attack at this point. Whereas if they're keeping High Templars, obviously there's a need to wait for Storm, which probably wasn't that fast. And then obviously if you saw that there was a 4th base being taken as well, these are signs that Stats won't move out aggressively. Plus it is Stats, and Stats would generally also be the person to do the whole win ahead, get more ahead, macro, defend, so on and so forth. Hero and Dark would be the ones to say, F it, let's just go for it. But this means that Stats is on 4 bases. Superior upgrades, because he's putting Chronos into that +1. Dark can't do the same, right? And Dark is trying to get to some superior technology by just forcing everything in the span of 2 minutes. You know, he droned up, he got his base, he got his upgrade. Only one, of course, but he's getting his technology. He's trying to fit everything in very quickly. But is it going to be quick enough? Because it's still not ever an ideal scenario. We didn't get up to 90 drones, calmly get to a hive, and then had enough minerals and gas to max out with 12 lurkers. So we're kind of, you know, slipping these lurkers in 1 or 2 at a time, which means they're not in the front lines. They don't have any upgrades. And so Stats doesn't have to worry about being lurkered right now, but it could be a worry in about 60 seconds. And can he defend against lurkers in that time? Perhaps. In 60 seconds, his Stargate transition will not be up and running, though, so he won't have that to help defend, but he might be able to get a big enough army with a concave, a couple of juicy storms, even a handful of immortals. And you can deal with lurkers, of course, but it gets difficult. The more lurkers and the more upgrades, the more that they do end up doing very well, shall we say, against the ground gateway army. A +2 lickety split for Dark, finally being able to afford that second evolution chamber. You know, despite the dedicated attack, shall we say, not working out for Dark, Stats' choice to not try and go aggressive, but just take the opportunity to say, okay, yeah, I can do my own macro thing, means that Dark does have the opportunity to then try and be, you know, as greedy as possible, really. Get to the drones, get to the bases, get to the technology, and then get to the army. But it is kind of scary, I guess, for both parties, because, again, for Stats, maybe the lurkers appear with an upgrade faster than he anticipates. He's not quite ready as far as positioning goes, and his ground army can't tackle 15 lurkers down a choke, right? But then for Dark, he's also got to worry about the timer of a possible Stargate transition, and Stats would absolutely be the guy to go for that, considering that Stats has not moved out whatsoever to even clear up a little bit of creep spread. It's fairly likely that he's going into Stargate. Not that Dark's actually scouted that quite yet, but it's fairly likely, right? And so Dark really needs to keep that in mind, especially because he does not have a Spire. His option for dealing with Carriers and Tempest are Abducts and Hydras. And that is, it's okay. But, you know, High Templars do feed back the Vipers, and then the Vipers might not have enough Abducts at some points if he continue to build into the Carriers. And it is a true macro game at this point. I mean, for such an action-packed beginning, we have slowed the heck down. Overlords positioning themselves either for scouts or, like this one, for a Baneling drop. It did scout the carrier, which, again, I don't think Dark was particularly surprised by. He does seem to be just full-on choosing to dedicate to his own ground army, not going to try and set up a transition as of yet. I mean, if it does go to 15, 16 minutes, we could see him go double Spire and double upgrades, of course. Finally attacking in, though. He's got that lurk count, 20 lurkers with at least... Oh, well, no, both are upgrades. There you go. And then a Nidus Worm trying to provide both reinforcements and a safe retreat. Really like that. Immortals all getting their shields popped there. Unfortunately, going through a choke, so they're a lot less effective. We got production under fire as well, and Stats... Well, couldn't get ahead of this. Wasn't on the map to even try and stop the lurkers from getting close to his base. And is going to lose a mothership pretty freaking fast. Ay, ay, ay. That didn't last very long. Minus 300, 300. And this, I don't know, this actually kind of seems like a very dangerous attack from Stats. Dark's control here actually really quite good. The Vipers are getting basically freebie shots off on the carrier and mothership, so no punishment there. Even though the lurkers got injured a little bit, they didn't actually die. We're still at 18, so he's only lost 2. And again, the Immortals are not really getting that perfect concave with their barrier up so that they can start tackling some lurkers. If they don't have a barrier, they actually look just as useless as a stalker, honestly. A Nidus Worm in the back line is going to be taken care of rather quickly, so Stats is trying to put out the most important fire the quickest, but there are multiple fires. And it feels like he only has one fire extinguisher. I don't know. I'm looking at these overlords, making sure we got no pesky little drops set up. We actually don't. Dark fully focused on the front lines. Did some damage, but even though Stats did lose a Nexus and lost some of his capital ships, actually his bank was pretty impressive because we had like 5 minutes of nothing, all right? And both players were, they had gotten up to a fine macro state. So they've been banking for a while. So Stats doesn't have to worry about that 5th base being lost, especially because, I mean, he got this base up and running. A little more worrisome if that was actually his only 4th. And a Nidus Worm in the main. Well, that could actually be so devastating without any units in it. Oh, well. one of those ones where maybe you didn't even really expect it to get up and running. Or hoped it was a bigger distraction. But anyway, I'm going to try that again eventually, I assume. And that might actually have at least like cracklings in it. No, we're nowhere near cracklings. Just kidding, ignore that. He does have speed at the least, but no adrenal glands, no melee upgrades. Storm trying to stop these Hydras from jumping on top of any units, but we did see a trade on a High Templar right there. And the Hydras barely lived. 3-2 on the way for the Zerg. 3-2 already done, actually, for stats, and he's working on +2 air. It's just that... well, I don't want to say that his composition is lopsided, because we actually see this composition a fair amount. It can cause some problems for the Zerg to appropriately identify what is really the biggest problem. Is it the ground army? Is it the air army? But I do think that it doesn't look promising for stats. I mean, his first move out didn't look promising, that's for sure. We're gonna need something a little bit stronger anyway. The next time that happens. Nidus Worm in the back line of the third base once again is not full of anything, so. I mean, it's always a chance, right? It's not like stats can ignore it assuming that nothing's in it, so. I'll say that Dark has taken a more defensive position, isn't trying to get into stats bases. He's more so taking the defensive approach. Stats starts to clear up a little bit of this creep, starts to send some of his army around as well. Little hit squads coming through. Dark does always have the potential of a Nidus Worm to backstab if he otherwise feels like his army is too focused on defending, then you can slip in, 2 or 4 lurkers into a Nidus Worm. Cracklings would be an excellent addition, especially because Dark is banking, and there's no doubt that Cracklings and a Nidus Worm are very, very annoying. But these Nidus Worms really aren't doing anything. I mean, they're being placed consistently in the same place, so Stats is always prepared for this. And they really aren't distracting a large number of units because of that, because Stats can calmly look back and be like, oh, my units are already there. Okay, then, don't have to worry, don't have to panic, which means that there's no other openings for Dark to enter in. I said 15 minutes, apparently it's 17 minutes that we finally have an additional Spire. Actually, I don't know when the first one went down, so maybe I was right, but it wasn't double Spire at the same time. We definitely had not prepped that full-on Corruptor transition, but kind of a little trickle in. Anyway, I have a Neural Parasite on the way. Okay, yeah, he's definitely setting up for that late game. Hello, Abduct on the Mothership once again. That might have just been a part of the army. It was just a part of the army. I was wondering if I was going to go for a recall attack, but no. It was part of the army, and now it's not. That these lurkers are kind of alone right there, and the Immortals are finally getting their chance to shine. 7 of them, a lot with their shields, and a decent concave as well. There we go. And they are punching through with the help of the carriers, of course, which is actually just not a very strong response to the carriers at this point. That Hydra number is not impressive. A Fungal goes down, a couple of Abducts go down, and the Interceptor count is dwindling. Here come more Hydras. A Microbial Shroud is a good choice at this point as well. And there we have it. Dark actually one of the ones to remember that exists, to be honest. Was a little late to it, but it came in at a pretty important time. Stats getting a little overzealous, seeing himself busting through the lurkers, busting through that hatchery, and the Hydra count was scary low. For a hot second, it looked like there was only like 10 Hydras and 60 Interceptors. And even though the Hydras are very well upgraded and the Interceptors aren't quite, they only have +2, it still is a little concerning. But more reinforcements were on the way, more spells were on the way, and Stats did overstep. Now, I say that as far as the actual just little microcosm that is that particular moment, that micro moment right there. In the grand scheme of things, Stats has the ability to overstep at least once, and he will be able to recover. His bases and his economy are still totally fine, and he does have some units, I think, back at home that he ended up building during that process, or maybe it had just been at home, or whatever it was. At least one of the carriers escaped, right? So I'm saying he didn't go down to 0 army supply. He goes down to literally 0 army supply. Dark counterattacks, we know it's game over. But Stats is able to build up, not quite to a max situation, but still another intimidating Protoss army. But this Zerg army really does feel quite confident in itself, doesn't it? 16 lurkers, and the Hydras being kind of guarded by the lurkers. And then the Viper was always there looking for that abduct as well. I mean, if everything goes according to plan for the Zerg player with this type of army, then absolutely fantastic. If they end up getting pulled out of position, or if they're not paying attention and don't get their spells cast, or if the Hydras are out of position and the carriers start, focus firing the Lurkers, there's still some things that can happen, but this is a pretty powerful army. Dark is not being forced to look anywhere else on the map, killing that base once again alongside 11 probes, now entering into the third base, which is actually becoming kind of obsolete, but nonetheless has mining to go, and that just might mean also the Lurkers can advance wherever they want to, or retreat. I mean, whatever they want to do, actually, because we have a Nidus Worm on the front lines. We could, once again, have a Nidus Worm anywhere else on the map at any time that Stats does have to worry about, so he's consistently had, like, 4 to 8 Stalkers not involved in the fight and taking up supply, actually. The 4 here and 4 here that I think he just forgot about. So that's actually kind of unfortunate. 8 supply that could have been into, I mean, a carrier at the very least, or maybe more High Templars. Might have been more useful. And now Stats is really on the ropes. He has lost 2 bases. Frankly, one of them was less important. This one still had a lot of mining to go, and now he's down to just really 2 base mining. I'm thankful for that. Does manage to kill one of Dark's hatcheries, and Dark's not exactly that much richer than Stats, so he still has to worry about a fight going really, really wrong. But it looks like everything's going right for Dark, who did the all-in. It didn't quite work, but apparently did enough. Stats tried to take advantage of the time that he knew Dark would then be building up an economy, to build up a stronger economy, get to the late game, get to the place that we know Stats is safe. But Dark, even though he says he doesn't like playing the late game, he is forced into it a lot, so he has practice. This is a little awkward, though. That Nidus Worm not actually sucking up all of the units. The secondary Nidus Worm does manage to help retreat a couple more Hydras and a Lurker, but that was a little more awkward than Dark was hoping for. Yeah, a lot of Infestors actually went down right there, and well, it's the situation I was talking about. Dark still has to be careful about a fight going very, very wrong. Parasitic Bomb on carriers that had lost their shields to a prior bomb was actually a pretty good idea, but a simple micro from Stats, because nothing else is happening, right? Dark just hoping that it'll buy him a little bit more time, a little bit more damage on his opponent. There's a couple of abducts. There's 4 abducts coming in. No repercussions for Dark, who also slaps down the Microbial Shroud on top of Spores, on top of Hydras. The Lurkers are still helping, but is it going to be enough? The Archons and Immortals actually got very friendly with the Hydras, and the Hydras are really the only unit that shoots up here. He doesn't have enough Spore Crawlers to cover that, and there we go. More reinforcements that his Stats had once again committed would have cost him dearly. The Vipers are trying to get rejuiced, only 2 of them left over, 3 Infestors to help. Right now, the concern is, in fact, the lack of Lurkers. For a long time, we didn't really have to worry about that number not being high enough, but at this point, absolutely, especially because some of them are defending bases. So to be fair, I was noting Stats is still the 4 Stalkers awkwardly around. Taking away supply. Well, Dark also had the same thing. It just felt like when he had 14 Lurkers, it didn't matter if he, could have had 16, you know what I mean? But certainly now would have to use them, and you do still need that ground, that more solid ground army. I mean, Mass Hydra's pretty good, but it can get stormed, obviously. Which can obviously be the Lurkers. So I would say maybe 8 Lurkers. It's kind of a really strong line in the sand against any amount of ground from your opponent. The Immortals and the Archons hold on for a little bit, but then suddenly they get low, they all pop, and some of those High Templars are very vulnerable as well. And then once the High Templars are vulnerable, the Hydras just have a field day against the Carriers and Interceptors. Abduct will go through, despite the feedback, and the Viper lives as well, even getting an Archon. Infestor's a little late to the party, though. That is exactly 8 Lurkers. I'm gonna give myself a pat on the back for that one, because I am not a Zerg player. 8 Lurkers, perfect. This base is basically defunct anyway. So giving that up's not the worst thing in the world for Dark, but really both players at this point would love to have another base to feel more confident in the late game as it goes on. As far as the resources lost, as expected, the Zerg is higher in that by about 6,000. It's not the worst, actually. And Stats loses one of his own important bases, but hold on here. We do have some of the spellcasters being jumped upon as the Hydras clearly were elsewhere. The Spore Crawlers do not cover against so many Interceptors, and the Hydras have got to run back, but is it too late? The Lurkers, fortunately, will survive because there's no detection, actually. Oh my god, I thought that was going to be so much worse for Dark. No detection, thanks to probably the Spore Crawlers there. meant that the lurkers did not die because they were alone, and the Hydras do kind of successfully get the kill on the Nexus and are able to return to save the day. It does look like a couple of Infestors died, and all of the Vipers died as well, so there were still problems with not having his entire army at home, but perhaps he still has enough to actually muster up some Vipers here, maybe a couple more Infestors. What gas does he have mining? Literally only this base. I don't know if that's actually... No, it's literally not enough. He only has 40 gas to mine from, and then he's defunct every which way I look. Oh, no. Oh, that's bad news, man. Because if he still has 2 extractors fully mining without a worry about them, right here, for instance, I really believe he actually gets enough of the spellcasters to cover his butt, because his main army, shall we call it, his non-spellcaster army, is pretty good number-wise. 30 Hydras, 10 Lurkers, right? But I think the lack of spellcasters is a problem. Dark actually adding on more drones. He believes that he is going to get this base up. He has 3 Lurkers defending it, so that does seem likely. No detection, but you know what we never had in this game? A Dark Shrine. And I actually think that is something missing. Oh, big mothership recall! I wondered if he was going to do this earlier on. Finally, actually gets to do it. And now it is so freaking awkward for Dark to go defend that. As far as placing his lurkers near his spore crawlers in a choke that gives him the advantage, great. But this is obviously the opposite way. But Dark is not going to just sit back and do nothing in return. We got the Hydras going for basically a base raid, killing a Nexus. Recalling the Nexus, however, from stats is going to save really his last mining base. Literally his last mining base. Both players down to 1 base mining, but Dark's is fresher. How much gas do we have here for the Protoss? About 700. He still has 800 in the bank, though. Oh, and Hydra is actually getting stormed thanks to a Warp Prism. That is such a dangerous thing to do at this level of this game. But the Hydras were absolutely caught by surprise. What did I say the number was earlier on? 30? Now it's down to 5. Oh, I can't believe I missed that. That was actually super cool. You don't expect stats to come in here as the person who drops High Templars onto Hydras at 27 minutes, but that probably just won him the game. Without the Hydras, the Interceptors will reign supreme. You can imagine how different this fight looks with 30 Hydras. Very well upgraded, tackling those 77 Interceptors. I mean, maybe it's still not enough, but add a Microbial Shroud and maybe a little bit of Stutter Step away from the ground army, and it might have been enough. But without the Hydra numbers, of course, Stats just goes for the victory. And after 27 minutes, Stats is going to take game number 1. Game number 2 is going to be an Oceanborn. Bottom right, Dark. Top left, Stats. Stats surprising me, certainly. By winning against Dark, I do heavily favor Dark. And then having the really cool finale. Someone in chat, pointing out that maybe it could have been that it was also an evacuation of High Templars away from the main base because they didn't get involved in the recall. But even if it was mostly that, to actually look back, see the opportunity as the Hydras were retreating, to then use the storms on the Hydras, that's, again, very, very risky. It is, I think, really easy to miss micro a Warp Prism, especially if the Warp Prism has speed, right? It's supposed to be easier to micro with speed, but actually just, I don't know, in my experience, against Hydras in particular, they have the range, they have the speed. It just means that they die faster as they run into the Hydras. And, yeah, the speed of which you have to be able to realize that and set up that situation, if that is something you weren't even thinking about initially, it's pretty freaking cool. Not what I expect from Stats, maybe Classic, but Stats not just showing off his defensive prowess, because a lot of that came with him defending, but also showing off his ability to take engagements. Dark was given any more time. He did have that full base mining, and things would have gotten worse and worse for the Protoss. If he hadn't lost all those Hydras, he certainly could have opted to entirely retreat. Now, he did lose a lot of technology, which he didn't really get around to talking about, but that main base wasn't just a base kill, obviously. It was like the Baneling Nest, the Evolution Chamber, the Spawning Pool, maybe the Infestation Pit. I believe the Spires were there. So maybe he couldn't add, actually, any more Spellcasters, which does take away his chances for victory. But if he was still able to, let's say, rebuild a Hydralisk Den and an Infestation Pit, because he rebuilt the lair somewhere. Then Hydras and Infestors would have been added in as he got the money, and then even like 5 extra Hydras, plus not losing the original ones. 2 extra Infestors. I mean, that could have been a big difference. But it is what it is. And honestly, Dark, kind of, quote-unquote, deserved to lose that game. He did the attack. He did the Ling Queen all in. And it didn't work. I mean, it really felt like it really didn't work. I think the consideration, though, of Stats doing his build needs to be re-examined, because it wasn't just that, I talked about how his setup was actually pretty decent. He had 5 gateways, he was pumping out stalkers, and that gave him the ability to get enough stalkers to defend. That is the most important thing, to actually live against an attack like that. But he was only at 11 probes on his 3rd base. He had not been very greedy with his probe production, or obviously his gas intake either. So, I mean, it certainly opens up the opportunity for Dark to catch up on the economy as he cut his own economy. Stats basically did the same thing. And then it was who's going to scale faster, who's going to scale better. And at the end of the day, you would maybe usually argue that the Zerg would scale better just with the larva mechanic. But then I think you also do have to consider, on both sides, what exactly the follow-up plan is. Is he going to double down on the attack against me? Or from Dark's perspective, is Stats going to go for the all-in? Unlikely, but still. And what ended up happening is that both players went, macroed, and it went a very long game. That is, still, kind of felt like since Stats did such a wonderful job defending, he was kind of supposed to win that game. So in a way, I'm kind of happy to see it. As a Dark fan, maybe not as much. And Dark is once again deflecting the triple Oracle opener as the Adepts stay behind. The Lings actually will try and tackle them. And 2 Adepts can only do so much, basically buy time for the Oracles to come back home, or for more Adepts to be warped in, which is exactly Stats' choice. The Oracles were actually trying to get some damage done. Seems like they recognized the Spore Crawler wasn't in the natural, and were hoping to find the Queens just the slightest bit out of position, but they did not. One of them getting actually very severely injured. That could have gone way worse. Way worse for both parties, I suppose. Stats could have not been paying attention to his Oracles and lost both of them. And then Dark could have not been paying attention to the Oracles and lost a bunch of drones. I think that's basically what it comes down to. That's what really would have done the damage. It's, you know what else does damage? Another all-in. Yep, yeah, all right then. That's a Roachwarren back there. Didn't even see it be put down. My bad. Roachwarren in the back. No drones at the 3rd. Queens walking through the middle of the map. Yeah, you think you know what's going on, don't you? Stats still, I think he really only recognized it. He was maybe like, hey, wait a minute, that's not a lot of drones. And then he saw the Queens. So this is still a pretty late response, all things considered. And this time around, he was not going directly into, I suppose, a Blink 5 gate. He wasn't being extremely greedy either. I mean, there's no probes at his 3rd, but he does have a Forge. And he does have a 3rd that is obviously not going to be defended. Doesn't even try to defend that. So a tough choice had to be made. Either try and defend your 3rd and your natural, because then you also have to worry about where they direct their attack and possibly lose the game, or lose your 3rd base and ensure that you get to play the rest of the game out. And he shows the latter. Oracle still getting some damage done, as well as getting very important scouting to see if Dark is doubling and tripling down. Dark is actually going back into drones. So Stats knows that this is not... It's no longer all in, I guess. It did its damage that it needed to. Nexus goes down. Cybernex score is targeted next. I do not believe the Zerg army will be able to actually bust through this. That is so many shield batteries. Yeah. Obviously, if Stats does something really silly, like move entirely away from his shield batteries, then that could have been terrible, but no, Stats canceling all those extra shield batteries. I mean, I say that his Oracles are doing a lot of scouting, but obviously that is a maybe, because he was trying to find damage more so, and then make sure not to die back at home. But they would have been able to see maybe more of the drones if they had looked. And now he knows that the army's pulled back, the drones have been made, and he needs to actually get back to his own macro. So unfortunately, while these 6 defensive structures are actually very important, we'll even count this other pylon as another thing that he wouldn't usually get, they are now seemingly less useful and not the best use of your money. If you could have 100% predicted that Dark wasn't going to just go ahead and try and bust you. Maybe you could have only done 2 shield batteries and a cannon. Maybe. But you definitely don't want to play that game. So, unfortunately, Nexus is going to be coming in quite late. Dark's already up to 65 drones. 70, actually. There's 5 more going to pop out. 4th base is on the way. Upgrade is on the way for Dark as well, but Stats, basically, I guess, as soon as he realized he wasn't going to die, did dedicate once again to the +1 attack, so he is faster on that again. And the Nexus isn't that much later as far as helping the 3-base saturation match Dark's 3-base saturation, right? Obviously, Dark got there quicker, but he's not on a 4th base to utilize the minerals as there as well. So it's maybe not the worst possible situation, but it's not the greatest either. You can see that Stats had actually spiked considerably in the income when he was not the one all-inning, but it has reversed. Swarm Host. It feels like I've been forever since I've seen Swarm Host. Good lord. Yeah, okay, yeah, Swarm Host makes sense. Swarm Host coming out, and Stats will have no idea until he sees a Swarm Host. Revelation might actually be able to see that. Yeah, the Swarm Host will pop for the Revelation, dissipates. Plus the Oracles are just chilling, man. There's no queen here. It's chilling. Oh, let's see a Nidus Worm. I mean, it has been so long, it feels like, since Swarm Host made an appearance, but this would absolutely be a tell, because it's very unlikely that somehow Hydras and Lurkers escaped your notice. So this would be a tell. I think it is. Stats did see the Swarm Host pop out, I believe, as well, so he should know, but now the question is, can he defend? The good news is that static defense that I was saying, like, oh, I kind of wish he didn't have to make it. Well, now it's useful again. This is, like, specifically useful against Swarm Hosts, which are guaranteed to attack into your natural. Unfortunately, not going to be able to save the charge, not going to be able to save the +2. Swarm Hosts, pretty good unit. Or Locusts are, anyway. And Stats just has to take his lumps. There's not much else to do here. He's got to take his lumps, hope that a SAC defense and his buildings take the brunt of the damage so that he can continue building up his army, and ideally into Storm and Archons as well. He moved out. I don't know about that. That's kind of scary. Good force fields, though. Good force fields. And you know that the Swarm Host are taking up a considerable amount of supply, so it's... You have to be very careful in Stats position 100%, but there really isn't that big of a Ling Roach Ravager army. Certainly not a lot of Lings, so they're not going to immediately surround you. And Ice Storm's coming up every which way. Nexus will have to be canceled. I mean, the Stalker should actually be very careful at this point. That wasn't a cancel. And that Nidus Worm provided the evacuation, no problem. Well, Dark, who's just, you know, la-di-da dying his way through this game, honestly. He's like, Swarm Host, Swarm Host, Swarm Host. Back at home, 4 bases, 69 workers, maybe a little less. Nope, Spore Crawler is ready. DT's not going to add much damage at all. And then technology. We have a possible transition over into mostly Lurkers after the Swarm Hosts have finally capped out on the amount of damage they can do. Bold choice putting the forward... Oh, no, I think it was the second forge, actually. Alright, I won't make fun of him then. Thought he replaced his forge in the same position. Our 4th base is back on the way, but that is 2 Nexus killed in this game. 1 very much cancelable. Colossus are on the way, which is obviously a great choice. Going to help out a lot if they were around. Thankfully, a couple of force fields saved the bulk of the Protoss army, because that looked like he was screwed once again. But he is pretty good with force fields, and the storms were just a little bit too much there as well. So Dark thought he found an opportunity. Stats denies him the opportunity while also saving his 4th base this time, and will probably have Colossus from here on out. He's also far more in control of the engagement now that he knows the army is there, so he knows what he's doing at this point. Oracle's still looking around, hoping to find any run-bys, or of course Nidus Worms, maybe even kill a couple of Swarm Hosts that aren't being paid attention to, and Stats is actually rocking and rolling at this point. Really impressive to hold on to such a game where you had to sacrifice your 3rd, and the Swarm Hosts appear, which are, you know, a pretty big upfront cost, but then they are free units. So you gotta worry about how much the Zerg player is getting damage done, and how much they're just expanding and exploding behind it. And that type of fear can really make you do stupid things. And so far, Stats, besides the lack of canceled Nexus, has not done something stupid. He's actually playing pretty freaking smart. And again, the Colossus are out, so they'll be able to, hopefully alongside the Storms, be able to tear down these Locusts. And in fact, the Locusts don't even try and go after the Nexus or the Probes. I believe they went after a couple of the Spellcasters. And the Oracles are also, again, scouting alongside an Observer, in fact, for any secondary attack. Clearly, the Swarm Hosts are no longer doing that big direct damage that the Protoss just can't really do much about. So the Swarm Hosts will eventually be moved on from. They just take up too much supply to have them as like a late-game army. And so, what is going to happen beyond Swarm Hosts? Well, you see a couple of Hydras there. You just played a game where there's a bunch of Lurkers. It's probably going to be Lurkers, just a guess. And that is exactly right. Dark could have a transition over into Lurkers. He's currently at 6, so I'm not going to call it quite yet, but he probably will build up more, and they will appear on the front lines very quickly thanks to these Nidus Worms. Roaches being sacrificed, ideally in a way that they do kill something first, but this is absolutely a sacrifice. He doesn't want the Roaches taking up his supply, and eventually he will be okay with Swarm Hosts getting killed as well. You just don't want to literally suicide them. Not the correct plan with Swarm Hosts at all. But as the Roaches die, you can see 10 more Lurkers added on, thanks to the supply opening up. We got it even more again once the Swarm Hosts basically kill themselves, whatever way they try to, you know. Cost-efficient way. Speaking of cost efficiency, you can check out the income and the units lost. Actually favorable to the Zerg. Not going to happen a lot of times, but one of those times that it can happen is clearly with Swarm Hosts. It's going to change. It is absolutely going to change as the game goes on. Especially because it seems like you're getting into kind of a late game, despite Dark's attempt to 1-2 punch here. He went for the early attack, and then he went into the Swarm Host. That's a very devastating 1-2 punch. Stats has handled it like a pro, but now it's a 1-2-3 punch as so many freaking Lurkers appear, and Stats is woefully underprepared for this. He doesn't have much to deal with Lurkers that are already well positioned, basically. If he could get a big concave, if he could buy more time, that could have been different, but you know he's also missing is charge. These slow Zealots just getting massacred. They don't even spread the damage out because they're so freaking slow. Charge just finished. Not that that would have really changed things, it just is an extra little cherry on top of the problems from earlier, because that was a Twilight Council that got sniped by the Locusts. Oracle's coming in hot, at least. Actually do end up killing a Lurker, because this Queen, I guess, is off creep. Both parties losing some drones, because the Stalkers decided they couldn't do anything about the Lurkers. They were absolutely right about that. Very smart call there from Stats, trying to kind of almost base trade it. Didn't kill the hatchery, but still. Better than trying to get a surround there, because even though surround might have had some promise, it is just exceptionally dangerous. Without the Immortals tanking the front lines, without the charge lots spreading out the damage, they get that kind of concave with charge. It's very, very dangerous. 6 Lurkers caught in a stasis trap, so they don't have to worry about them for a little while. Queens caught away from anything that can help them out with tons of transfuses. They're not dying very quickly, but actually they're doing surprisingly well. They're actually killing these Stalkers, guys. And then Stats was like, well, maybe I can get us around here, and quickly noped out of that. Especially because I wasn't, I don't think he knew exactly where the other army was. So this army appeared, and this army also was headed a different direction. This is only half of Dark's army. Keep that in mind. Stats has, like, I want to say 80% of his army here, but the truth is, that's not a lot of Stalkers. A lot of his army is in supply. It's not quite on the front line, so he's building all these, oh, there we go, 3 extra carriers, there it is. He's also building double Immortal. He is getting a better composition up against what Dark is throwing at him, but it clearly took a little while. Where the last game, there was a long, peaceful 6 minutes or whatever it was, where you could kind of predict how the game was going to go. So Stats had already built up a decent amount of Immortals off of 1 Robo. I mean, this game, he got hit in the face multiple times. And is just kind of reeling and reacting to it every single time. And again, kudos to him. Many other Protoss would not have been able to react to any of these builds. They would have died to the first attack, they would have died to the Swarm Host, would have died to the Lurkers. But Stats, despite being pushed back, keeps on getting up. And he's actually even doing a little bit of damage to his opponent every time we look. He did lose his 4th Nexus, though, so he's back down to just 3 base mining. 4th is only halfway done, so that 1 hatchery kill isn't quite going to make up for that. Dark has a bank, Dark has more bases, and Dark is the one that's maxed out. So he's still banking. But if Stats could get a double expand going, which he could afford, mineral-wise, but can't really afford, like, attention-wise, then I would really feel good about it. But yeah, attention-wise, you can't do it. His army is having a lot of trouble being split because it wasn't the optimal army against Dark was throwing at him. And obviously Protoss in general just kind of wants to be in that clump. That's how their army works. So the Stasis Trap catches 5 Lurkers that time, and with 4 carriers out, these Lurkers are actually in a little bit of trouble. Hydras were a little late to the party, but Stat's not able to take advantage. Actually has yet to cast Revelation, and his observers were kind of dependable last game. There was at least that one time where they weren't around, so generally you want to be very careful about purely depending on observers. You do want the oracles getting revelations. So far just on the swarm host, which actually had never been sacrificed. I did expect them to go ahead and kind of lazily throw themselves some which way, but nope. But maybe that's not a good thing. You know, Dark obviously intentionally keeping them alive, want to get this harassment done. That's cool, but it's also a lot of supply away from what could be upwards to 20 Lurkers and 30 Hydras, similar to the army he had last game. 3-2 on the Hydras, by the way, and only +1 from the Interceptors, so that's not looking so hot. Dark has a very strong response against the Interceptor counts. The Lurkers basically had no response to them, so they are just whacking away there on the Nexus, and that is stats, again, back down to his original 3 at 18 minutes. I'm actually surprised he has mining on his 3rd, but that is probably because he did lose it earlier on in the game. That is so many freaking Lurkers, man. And, like, even if the Immortals got a perfect concave, they're just not killing that many Lurkers. Ay. Another Nidus from over to the right side and the left, every which way that we look. Stats is being choked in this game, and he basically has to choose to either fight or flee. Either take the all-in right now, which is what he's doing, or GG out, actually, because he is in a rough spot. And he knows it as well. His best option is to go for the attack and hope that the attack is decent, so that he can at least get a base up and running and finally have his economy recovered. But as he takes his 4th, he loses his natural. Obviously, there wasn't a lot of mining to be done there, but it was still some safe gas mining. That's unfortunate. Another base is going to be denied, hopefully canceled this time around. Stats, though, not able to pay attention, is not going to get the cancel because he was engaged upon. It's a lot of storm slap down, but hardly any kills on the Lurkers by the looks of things. More Nidus Worms. More of an intimidation factor at this point, honestly. They are also providing a safety escape, but I like to think they're intimidation. Especially if we have the Nidus Worm starting to pop up in the natural and main base. Exactly what is happening. Stats, not really with a solid plan of how to deal with this. And the Swarm hosts are still being a bother as well. He's going to try and come in. I was going to say from 2 different directions, but not really. Now stuck between 2 different Zerg armies. Looking very awkward. Very, very, very awkward. Those Vipers are looking for the abduct. They actually are not going to find it. They get a blinding cloud. That actually kind of confused me for a second. I was surprised by that. But there's the abducts. The Vipers did get feedbacks, and the Immortals did punch through most of the Lurkers, thanks to the help of the rest of the army, of course. The Nidus Worm provided the escape for many a unit, as Dark realized that wasn't the ideal scenario, so he can run back home and take an ideal scenario later on, or just keep picking away here at the Protoss army with his Locust. They'll never attack the air, great, but they'll kill all the charge lots, they'll kill the Immortals, they'll kill the Colossus, and Stats cannot replace that. Not even going to be able to kill Dark's 5th base. As well, it is worth noting, Dark doesn't have a lot of mining, I guess, but clearly more than Stats. And Stats has just been beaten too many times in this game. Dark is going to win it. In the bottom right, we have Dark. In the top left, it is Stats. Stats already performing way better than I expected. I mean, I never thought that he looked really out of shape, like, oh my god, you're nowhere near where you used to be, but it was certainly something like a 70%. And I'm not going to say he's at 100% and he's going to win BlizzCon again or something, but it does feel like he's more like an 85 or a 90, because his first game displayed a stronger defense and a stronger multitasking than I was expecting by about 10%. I'm throwing out numbers. But the second game, I actually was even more impressed. It was the game that he lost, but I was even more impressed because I really feel like that was exactly the type of game that a lot of the Protosses would have fallen to, and then Stats would have been the only one to consistently defend, you know? that strategy literally was a very popular strategy. Nidus Swarm and Swarm Host was a very popular strategy in 2019 when Dark won his BlizzCon, which is kind of a forgotten WCS Global Finals, is what it's technically called. And I would say a lot because of the meta at that point. It was not a good meta. And it was very Zerg favored. Obviously, I think Dark is good enough to, at any point in time, win a GSL, win a BlizzCon, win a Katowice, whatever, but it's pretty Zerg favored. Anywho. But yeah, it was one of those situations where 2019 happens, all of the Protoss get culled by a similar strategy, and then Stats is the only one who can actually defeat it. The Shield of Ire comes in. That was kind of the feeling there, even though Stats eventually lost. The Dark is clearly having a tougher time against the returnee here than I anticipated, perhaps more than he anticipated. You know, there'd be certainly a time, again, years ago, back when Stats was playing at his best, in which you would question whether or not Dark's aggressive style actually is basically better than Stats' defensive style, right? So you knew that they'd be butting heads, it'd be sword versus shield, and it would be a question of who is literally better. But then Stats would start predicting a lot of the all-ins and would start just getting ahead of the attacks, and then Dark might actually be the one to falter more. And that was certainly some of the storyline between the two back in 16, 17, 18, whatever it was, right? But nowadays, for me, I certainly just expected Dark to come in here wielding a hammer and squashing Stats' head like that. And one comedian no one remembers from the 90s, you know, like a watermelon. And not happening whatsoever. Stats sticking to his guns. Stargate once again coming through. Isn't broke, don't fix it, I guess. He did lose last game, and honestly, it really looked like he was going to lose the first game, too. So, I mean, I wouldn't say it's broke, of course, but it's not like he's having the best time of his life doing this opener. He's actually been unable to find damage, but it is a very safe one. Absolutely. Gallagher, thanks, guys. But it is absolutely a safe opener. No doubt about that, especially the way that he plays it with the Adepts staying back at home. And that is, you know, Stats, safety, 3 base. Then we really get to see him churn in there. That's when he feels the best. So it's not surprising to see him do it 3 times in a row. Very Stats. But he did try and at least throw a little bit of a curveball in the first game. And it was a curveball. I think it did mess up the expectations of Dark. He was going for a blink attack, and so he could do it again. He could do even a later Resonant Glaives build. He could do a more focused blink attack like the first game. I want to say he could even do a 2-base all-in, but I really don't believe that's true. That's just not true for Stats. It's hardly true for any Protoss nowadays, but definitely not true for Stats. It's more of a question of, you know, Forge, Twilight Council, Robo, in what order, at what time. That's pretty much it. This Ling should probably just stick around as long as possible. Already burning the Pulsar beam from the Oracle is nice. But then there's a chance it stays around for so long that it even delays like a Twilight Council being slapped down because Stats wants to kill it before it's slapped down. Okay, well, the Ling's not controlled. Just kidding. Never mind. Overlord over the natural. Could maybe slip into the main anyway, because we are not getting a Phoenix. We are not getting a Void Ray. Oh, the 2 Adepts actually went aggressive. My bad. Sorry. I thought Stats was going to do literally the exact same thing. But he actually made 4 Adepts in total. Wait, no, he made 5, right? Yeah, he made 5 Adepts in total. So he just made 2 more units. And then he went aggressive with it, which is actually working out really well. The 2 Adepts help distract, and the Oracles are actually really... Oh my god, they're getting so much damage done. 9 drones. For the cost of 2 Adepts, 100% that's worthwhile. Ooh. Ouchies. The Queen's got pulled over here, so the Oracle's got some damage done, and then the transfer of drones is just such an unfortunate thing for Zergs, basically. Like, I empathize with that situation as someone who never pays attention to the drone rally. And that is a sucky start for Dark, by far the suckiest in this series. And Stats is going to go into Twilight Council and Forge, so nothing as far as an immediate follow-up goes, but he can feel very good about his chances in the macro game. And if Dark was planning on doing something aggressive off of 3 bases, then you did just cut its power and its timing a bit. It doesn't seem like Dark was ever planning on doing that. He does have an Evolution Chamber building +1, so definitely not one of those Roach all-ins or the emphasis on the, I suppose, Ling Queen all-in like the first game. But it just, yeah, means that his macro is a little bit worse. At least some revenge is had as the queens find an oracle not being paid attention to. It's something, but I would still say the Protoss feels better about the situation. There's just so many drone kills so early on. 3 bases with all the gases set up as Stats goes very quickly into the Templar Archives. And Dark is actually getting a double expand up, so he'll be pressing down that drone button for some time. Actually trailing behind Stats' worker count, though, for a little while there. The most ideal. And very little to be done to stop Stats from macroing at SimCity. We got, well, we don't have Storm yet, but we have the units there. And the High Templars are very, very safe. A Roachborn coming down now for Dark as he still is pumping out drones first and foremost, but we get a stronger glimpse into his strategy. Okay, the Infestation Pit also coming down. Stat's going to be wanting to see that, but obviously in the very far back, it's going to be difficult to do. He sees the Fast Evolution Chamber. He saw that a long time ago, so he probably figures it's +1 melee. Oh, but Jesus, more drones actually being caught on an unfortunate transfer. Ay, ay, ay. That is just a second Evolution Chamber scouted. Not really all that informative. Stats probably going to be looking for a 4th base soon. It is going to be to the top right. Charge is not on the way because Blink is actually completing first. I was a little surprised by that because I see Zealots. I don't see Stalkers, but I'm going to assume it's on purpose and he just figures he has time to get both. But usually you do see the unit that is benefiting from the upgrade built first. But oh well. He'll get there. I hope. Don't forget Charge. Bunch of pylons coming down, as once again it looks like both players are prepping for a real late game. You know, that first game, there was a little bit of hubbub before they both clearly were going into a 5-6 whatever base setup, but they did eventually get to that point here. Hardly any hubbub. Just those oracles finding more drones than they should have. As time progresses, as they get to more bases and they get maxed out before actually ever punching each other, the drone losses will matter less and less. Still not an ideal game for Dark, who is actually adding on a very fast Spire, so we could have an attempt to go into a Greater Spire. It's kind of a, I guess it's a double-edged sword to go into a faster Greater Spire on a map like this. Because on one hand, the weakness is that the Protoss or the Terran, whoever you're facing, gets you much faster with whatever attack they end up doing. But on the other hand, you can get to them much faster with your Broodlords, who still have a problem with mobility, and still have a problem, I guess, as far as, I mean, they do have counters, I suppose, so you don't want to give them as much time as possible for them to get the counter up and running, you know, Stargates, basically. So that would, no matter what happens, I guess it happens fast on a more direct map like this. But I was just directly calling Greater Spire because, you know, the Hive was finishing at the same time. I feel like that's usually a logical thing. No one can make fun of me for it, but it's actually Mutas. Okay. Seven Mutas? Okay. At minute 9 doesn't sound that weird, of course, but it's more like it's Mutas after the Hive is done. That's a little weird. And will certainly be a surprise, I tell you what. But Blink is done, despite no Blink Stalkers really being made. 8 of them somewhere. There is the ability to make them. I guess if the 7 Mutas kill like 15 probes and force the army back, then it's pretty much worth it. Over that 6 probes, they force the Stalkers back. I'm not sure that was worth it, because I don't think Stats was really ready to push out anyway. He's not quite maxed out. He is adding on his technology before further expanding. And Dark, well, I guess could still depend on the Mutas a little bit to get a little damage, pull back a little bit of the army, and get a little bit of scouting. And right now, everything combined together, Dark is clearly the one who's actually positioning himself on the map, so plenty of time to add on whatever technology he wants to, while also building a bank, and while also potentially prepping for a full-on transition, I guess. Gotta be careful, of course. Gotta be careful. If Dark throws away his entire Ling Baneling Roach army, no Ravagers, right? Yeah, Roach army. Well, obviously Stats might go ahead and counterattack. And then Dark will not have enough time, but that is what we're witnessing right now. How can Dark control the situation? Stats just on the defensive, now building up an immortal count as he realizes the ultras are in play, or just predicts them. Do you see one? I think he just predicts it. Yep, he has like very, very, very little scouting. He's just getting an immortal count. They're thick, they're chonky, they're nice. 2-1 for both parties. Dark actually having the Ling upgrades, though, which are missing in the last couple of games. And are always intimidating. Cracklings aren't a joke. And I could assume a Nidus Worm will be planted at some point. No Nidus Worm in this game, though. Well, it's like you have the great unit that goes along with them, but don't actually have the Nidus Worm. They get us around on some of these immortals, though. They're actually going to be able to peck through those shields pretty freaking quickly. Archon being, miscontrolled. AI working against stats for a little bit here as he is distracted by Lings and Banelings rolling into the natural. No longer able to one-shot those probes. And nope, it is a proper distraction. Stats losing a couple of immortals as he once again is trying to juggle 3 different defenses. And it wasn't a huge defense at any particular location, but it was just enough to force more of a reaction from Stats. And that's really important as far as the Zerg perspective, because there wasn't a big chunk of Roaches that just sacrificed themselves for half a second bot. Oh my god, never got cut in his plating. That's a mistake. That was just a straight up mistake. Whoopsie-daisy. That could have been on the way for so long. But anyway, that's actually a big problem. I was going to say, it's important because Dark basically committed very, very little to get all that damage done, all the distraction done, and by a decent amount of time. And so we could get a decent number of Ultras, but now we have 7 Ultras, but no chitinous plating. And if Stats did move out, especially since he has already 4 and almost 6 Immortals, I mean, I'd be very scared. But it looks like Dark's run-by is going to buy him that time necessary to get to that extra armor. He's getting 2 Corruptors as well, so he'll be able to actually add in the Broodlords 1 or 2 at a time. He doesn't have that much supply even after the sacrifice of the Roaches. Oh, excuse me. But nonetheless, he will have that transition prepped. They can also clearly try and just target fire the mothership. Oh, the burrow. Forcing Stats to consider what is burrowed in my base. The Nidus Worm did come down. I just completely missed it. And the Oracle is going to have to wait a little while longer to cast Revelation. No, it actually does have it, but it's not Lings popping out and immediately burrowing. It's a couple of Ultras popping up and saying hello with their chitinous plating. Ultras on the right side as well. Now, Stats has his army. It's a pretty freaking good army. So if he loses economy, even if he loses a base, that's not the worst thing in the world. And so far, he is keeping his bases alive, his probes alive as well, though he is losing some of his reinforcements. And yeah, I think he's doing fine. Patience above all, I think, at this point. It's very easy to get super distracted, as he did just a couple of minutes ago. And start losing 2 Archons there, Mothership over there, a couple of Archons here. So this is annoying. There's red blips every which way we look for Stats. Stats is nonetheless still on 5 bases, 67 workers, and 121 army supply, finishing up some of his upgrades. Not starting up a transition over into air, though, and that is becoming a bigger and bigger problem because Dark absolutely was adding in Broodlords 1 or 2 at a time. Whenever some unit died on the offensive, he added in a Broodlord. He's going to be at 12, and they are going to have a couple of upgrades on their side as well. +1 projectile, +3 when the Broodlings are on the ground. That is actually kind of spicy, although Stats also has +3 armor and shield, so just kind of negate each other, I suppose. But you always got to worry about just the good old dynamic. Broodlings stopping those stalkers from getting anywhere close. Archons with their little T-Rex arms, not being able to shoot them. That's the danger. And Stats just doesn't actually know about the Greater Spire. Doesn't know about the Greater Spire, doesn't know about the amount of Broodlords that are already created. Probably has an idea that there could be Broodlords on the way. It's just the way the game is gone. But to have all of them already here, ready to defend the base in a choke as well, I mean, that was just absolutely not going to work out. Stats, I think, distracted as the Stalkers got pushed back by Ling Baneling and then had to try and defend the probes, which they did not. Speaking of which, more probes going down on the right side as well, and Stats is in all types of trouble. He has 8 Immortals that were wonderful against the Roaches and the Ultras, but are freaking terrible against the Broodlords. They literally don't shoot up, And even if you're like, but, they can kill the broodlings, they don't kill them that fast. They're not splash. They're nothing. They're terrible. In fact, now they're just a liability. And the infestors could parasite the immortals to then punch away at the stalkers, which are stats only anti-air. Truly, the mothership doesn't count. Archons don't count. The stalkers are the only thing that even could get close to the broodlords. And the problem with that now is that infestors are here, so they could parasite whatever they wanted to, but they can also fungal. Lings still being little annoying cracklings, trying to get efficient trades. Nidus Swarm's hoping to distract. Nothing in that one once again, though. His stats was showing his army on the creep, so Dark is respecting that. Dark knows that he can still take, theoretically, a terrible engagement. There's 36 stalkers on the field. If he thinks they're all coming in from one direction, but then 20 of them come over from the left side, I mean, it gets a little awkward. But it's even more awkward than that. All of your High Templars, as a Protoss player, being caught by the broodlings. Yes, they slapped down whatever storms they could, but quick transfuses, or just time, would have healed those broodlords back up. So yeah, you don't want to be over-eager as Dark just because you think you have aha, broodlords versus ground, but if you do play your cards right here as the Zerg, you're supposed to win, I would say. Apparently the Temple Archives was sniped as a couple of Lings did finally pop out of the Nidus Worm, and they do kill buildings very quickly. Stats with 3,700 gas. What the shit? So much gas for a Protoss player. Does have enough to replace High Templars, no problem. That's not a worry as of yet. Dark with only 3,000 resources down from his Protoss opponent is in a very, very good position. 88 workers on 7 bases as well, though this one might die. This kind of seems like a freebie, actually. The Broodlords are kind of fast now, and they were close, but that is past tense. They do get distracted by a base snipe to the left. All right, this is a good old 1-2 punch here, nicely done by Stats, who always has the Nexus recall to defend if a run-by happens. Okay, well, he's not going to use it. There it is. There it is in the 5th base. I guess he was just deciding exactly where he wanted to defend. Unfortunately, there are multiple places under attack, and they have already done the probe damage. Dark's army was chasing down the bottom left army, too, so Dark will finally get this pesky army out of the way, let him stop killing my bases, and even kill a couple of the units. Now, the Immortals are almost, I mean, they're not free. You don't want to just give them up for no reason, but I mean, I guess they're not the most important thing to be paying attention to as they lose their lives. So that's okay. That's a good thing, I guess. Gonna be replacing those with probably more Stalkers or Archons. You don't want to get rid of Immortals completely, of course, because Ultras can make an appearance, and Lings and Ultras trying to surround your ground army is, classic. But probably don't need 8 Immortals. Probably. Infestors, actually the only thing here, so they're just buying time. We never really consider the damage of Fungal, because it's not worth considering. Although, if you chain enough of them, I guess they are. They finally pierce them through the shields. Okay, what the heck, man? What the heck? The Infestors are like, where's the cavalry? Hello? Hello, cavalry? Hello? That took a long-ass time, man. And Stats is actually doing a great job forcing Dark to stay at home and not be in proper position at any time. Now, these base snipes are good. They are better than nothing, especially because Stats is managing to keep most of his army alive whenever he does it. But they're also not truly devastating to Dark yet. After 6 300 mineral hatcheries go down, okay, then you're wondering if this is how you're going to lose the game. But even then, even if he had no mining and only his army, because there is still no Stargate option, there is always that chance that Dark can kind of all in and force, well, possibly a true base race. So there's still that to respect. There's still Dark's bank to respect. But Stats is really doing a great job as far as this ground-based anti-Broodlord type of play, which we've seen from other Protosses. It is possible, it's just difficult. And there is a point in which, theoretically, the Broodlord army wins a direct fight whenever it is taken. Immortal's doing a great job managing to defeat the Ultras and the Banelings there. Now, they should be taken down by the next wave of Lings, exactly case in point, but still, good trades. Even an Immortal still alive, packs a punch against the Ultra. More Lings are going to be necessary down there. Dark just going into Ling Ultra as a countermeasure to all of these run-bys, and then losing them in really not super cost-efficient ways. Remember I mentioned the resources lost a couple of minutes ago, and it was really good for the Zerg. Well, now it's looking a little bit more in line for PVZ, which is a 7,000 resource difference. Still, I would say decent for Dark, but much better looking, especially as Stats has gotten his bases up and running again, this 5th up and running, as well as the 6th up to the top right corner. Keep on looking at the blue in the main, thinking something is going to happen, but Dark, if he's hoping that Stats F2s, apparently Stats is very good about not F2ing. He never F2'd those 4 stalkers to the bottom left in the first game. Pretty sure. Broodlords are not going to take this base standing down, man. They're like, okay, there's one thing we can do, and that's defend this base and attack this base. Give us a little credit here, guys. But if they're attacking up to the top right / defending to the top right, they're not in the bottom left. But there's a bunch of other Zerg units there. And the Banelings really pulling in from the backside. It was a surprise to Stats as he is forced to abandon the Immortals. And the Ultras were plentiful enough to chomp down on the small number of Immortals that were initially there. More coming forward, of course. Infestor spotted by an Observer and now going to be sniped. Dark thinks he's getting a back attack, but didn't realize he was actually being looked at. Camera was right on him. Archons forming in the nick of freaking time right there, as Cracklings would have nibbled them to death before they even formed. They jumped on top of them immediately. And Stats is still holding strong. Yes, he had to give up this base, but it's kind of, this is kind of the expected thing, honestly. This base is not going to be easy for the Protoss to take because it's so far away, and it's close to a very useful base from the Zerg. So if the Zerg decides to take the right side, defend and attack from this position, okay, yeah, you can't take that base. But that's when you just take these bases. And that's exactly what Stats is doing, clearing up the creep, clearing up the hatcheries, taking the left side of the map. He might even be able to get this base, honestly, that Dark is not really ever mined from. He's gotten the hatchery, but he's not really mined from it. Lings and Ultras finding an opportunity to kill a base that is mostly mined out. If they can escape, then it's totally okay. If a couple of these weakened Ultras get shot down, then maybe it's not okay. Alright, yeah, Lings left behind to chew on the Stalkers. Ultras will be able to evacuate. The Dark is now going to lose 2 bases again. And he canceled 2 bases anyway. Not ones that he strictly needs. But this is getting a little bit worrisome. Dark isn't quite getting tit for tats anymore. He is simply huddling into his warm winter coat and saying, well, I guess you can't kill me here. But everywhere else belongs to Stats. Stats is now the Zerg player. And if he's a Zerg player, it means he's getting a bigger economy. If he's getting a bigger economy, we could have a transition on the way. Fleet Beacon and Stargates are prepared, as we can see, as Dark has seen. Or he could try and do a true Zerg thing and just consistently throw armies at Dark and hope that eventually he wears the Broodlord army thin. Snidus Worm is determined to get up, man. I think this one actually will. But Stats is looking for an attack, so will Dark even pay attention to it? Oh, it didn't! Oh, I underestimated Zealots +3. It's a lot of Storms, which aren't necessarily what Ultras worry about, but there's also a handful of Immortals underneath that mothership worthy of consideration. Infestors would like to start off the fight, ideally, and remember, they do have Neural Parasites, so I was talking about the Immortals being used against Stats, and that could happen, but then it's a classic battle of... Oh, I love it, the Oracle. Oh, well, I don't... Okay, well, wait, what? Alright, the Oracle being Neural Parasited is really fun, but I think he tried to Neural Parasite the mothership, and either missed, or the Infestor died too quickly, they didn't actually go through. I think that's what happened, because I don't know. That was weird. Anyway, not the most effective Infestors. A lot of them died, a lot of them got feedbacked. Recall is forced out, though, as the Broodlords are still kind of king of the direct battle. And it's only a direct battle that they're going to work out against. I mean, something like this, they're not even here. They're not even here, and Dark's Ultra is getting massacred by this strong anti-Ultra army. I'm really feeling like Ultras have not been the way to go for the last however many minutes. Stats did add on Hydras a little while ago. And he does have a Lurker Den, so he actually has Lurkers as well. But I don't know. I guess I like Banelings, but we don't have any gas for Dark now, so that's a problem too. I don't know, man. Perhaps if he had just added on lurkers, so he had, let's say, 15 Broodlords, 10 lurkers, 6 infestors, and however many vipers he could afford alongside that, maybe that would have been a better composition as far as purely defending. He would not have gotten any of the run-bys that he's gotten, of course, with the Ultras. But have they really been all that useful? Probably not. Dark finally moving completely forward with his Broodlords, but at a point in which this Nexus is useless. It's actually useless. He doesn't even hold a particular position for it, honestly. These bases are much more important, and the Ultras are trying to get on top of it. Injured Ultras, which a couple of Stalkers can even focus fire, but we got action every which way we look. Lurkers are here, and they are pesky, because it just requires a different way of fighting them. But fortunately, plenty of observers were there, as this last one holds on strong, man. He's got 10 health, and he's going to hold on. Although there are no more lurkers, they didn't actually form. Mothership providing the cloak as well, as Dark lost the Spore Crawlers. He actually lost his vision too, so that's worth considering. And we have Blinky Blinks all around the freaking map, but guess what? Dark is the one that's losing all the Blinky Blinks. The Broodlords killed 2 Nexus that were basically useless, have no response to the Tempest that finally made their way out. His run-bys really aren't the most effective, although this one might kill a base. It took a lot of dedication for him to do that. And now I'm worried that Dark just no longer wins the actual battle. There is something that directly deals with Broodlords. There's Tempests. Plus, the Broodlords are so under-defended, there's hardly anything on the ground for them that the Stalkers could also probably kill them. Stats! Through thick and thin, man. He just pushed through, again, 27 minutes. And this game, I believe, is his. Dark just doesn't have an answer. Stats whittled him down. Very nicely done. Stats' late game PvZ quite intimidating. And he did have to defend against Dark's aggression in the early game to even get here. So it's not like Dark played into his hands or something. I think Dark is right to stay in the game, of course, but might realize how poorly this game is going. There's always that consideration of, okay, how much bank do they have? Because if the Protoss is at 0-0 and this bottom left base is mining out, well, there's a chance. For sure, there's a chance. But he knows this base is pretty healthy. He's seeing consistent production. At least he saw a couple more Tempests in the main, for instance, and that's not a good sign. And his only hope is that Stats gets overconfident and then runs his entire army into Fungals and Broodlords. It could happen. I think if Stats just doesn't A move, he's okay though. Nice Fungal. Very nice Broodlord surround on some of these units. Nice War Prism pickup as well though. A couple of Archons, a couple of Immortals taking a lot of damage or dying. Handful of Corruptors were made, and in fact one Tempest is going to be killed. Just miscontrolled right there. But we are still at 3 Tempests with 2 more on the way. More economy for Stats who could really, really dedicate to Tempests and Carriers, and then the Corruptors won't be good enough. Because that's one thing Dark really can't afford to make is a lot of Corruptors. He does not have the mineral income to do so, and they're pretty freaking expensive. Feels like when I make mutas, it's just like hold that muta button down. When I make Corruptors, there's like, okay, you get 1. Maybe 2 if you're lucky. Another Fungal hoping to catch some of the frontline units, but those frontline units, although they were caught, still added some good damage to the Corruptors. 1 Archon hit was pretty freaking good. Yeah, he can't even afford a Spire. I mean, he could choose to go into it, because he has a lair, but... Nope. Oh, he had a lair. He could have chosen to go into it. Oh, okay. Nope, he just rebuilt the Hydralisk Den. Hydras are the only thing he can use here. Which wouldn't be so bad if it wasn't for the storms accompanying the Protoss army. Dark is what? Gonna take the last stand here? Yep, gonna take the last stand. He will kill one of Stats' only mining bases as well. They do have a almost completely even supply, but the potential of the Protoss army feels so much higher. I'd feel very differently if we had Vipers and more Infestors. but we don't, so yeah. That's a pretty freaking good fungal. That's a very good fungal. If only there was something to really take advantage of it. And there wasn't. There's nothing that could have gotten close. The Hydras would have been Storms. The Broodlords would have been Tempest. Stats is going to win 2-1 versus Dark. That is just not the result that I was expecting. And I think Dark is also still trying to digest it. Even though supplies don't look that different, because 38 drones are making up most of Dark's supply. Recall is definitely a safe play. Because I suppose there was a chance a legitimate base race could happen if Sats didn't have a recall. That would have been a crazy end to the game. But that will not be the case. Dark will in fact fall to Stats and go down to the losers match. Second preliminary match, gonna be in the top left Classic, and the bottom right Bunny. So we had 3 fairly long PVZs. Now we get into PVTs. The general consensus amongst the level-headed pros, I suppose, has been that Protoss definitely was rewarded with the last patch, not the current one that people are testing, but the last one. They did feel, actually, that Protoss did get really good benefit from that as far as the PvZ matchup went. And some of them would even go as far as to say that the Zergs really got screwed. So they know a lot of Zergs who straight up struggle in the matchup. So you could, kind of maybe talk about that as far as stats versus Dark, if you really wanted to. But for PvT, the general consensus is still that the Terran has the upper hand, is the more intimidating race, is the race that has more potential to end the game abruptly than the Protoss player, because we're talking about professional TVP, we're not talking about, 5-minute DTs killing a Terran player. Not often, anyway. I guess it does happen. And Classic is one of the guys who does DT in the professional leagues here, so don't want to entirely count it out, but generally it's not really well done because Terrans are very good about keeping a scan. They're adding in Ravens all the time in their builds, obviously. Yes, the Raven change, the interference matrix no longer being default to the Raven, did help, particularly on the Colossus being disabled issue. The KO, get out of the game moment when the first Terran push happens with the Raven. It did fix that issue. However, you are still talking about some of the Cyclone openers being very difficult to handle, engineering bay blocks into factory openers being difficult to navigate and difficult to perfectly defend against, whether they are the Cyclones or the Hellions. Proxy Starport obviously can still end the game, and Wood of Mine drops theoretically can also end the game. We certainly do see that, but weirdly enough, a lot of Protoss players don't really complain that hard about it. But anyway, so I guess what I'm trying to say is that it's a scary first game for Classic, but I thought that Stats was having the scariest first game versus Dark. I thought he was up against the most intimidating player of the group and the favorite to win it as well. But he won, so what do I know? And Classic, as I had said in the very beginning of this cast 60 minutes ago, he is one of the Protoss that people look to as far as leading the race, telling us what to do and how we should do it. It's just that he didn't make it into Katowice. He got very, very, very close. Very close. But he didn't. He lost in the qualifying match 5 times or something insane. So we didn't really get to talk a lot about him or see a lot of what he was doing in the high-stakes world of an offline tournament. Well, GSL is offline, so you can certainly count it here. And this is where we get to see him and what he can show all the Protoss of the world, what to do and how to do it against a very aggressive Terran in the name of Bunny. Bunny starting off with something very typical, factory expand. It's not particularly aggressive, but Bunny, when it comes to his decision-making, can often be the guy who all-ins versus tries to adapt to macro or something. Can doom drop versus play the safe game. Phoenix opener from Classic is one to go into the Stargate. This Reaper is about to scout that. Oh, look at that. It's the Phoenix and a Robo. I guess. I wonder what this is going to be. Blah. Obviously, we're talking about Phoenix Colossus. Highly doubtful that a Protoss player will cancel this Robo. But Classic can be a very intriguing Protoss player, can't he? He shows off great mechanics. But we do think of him as a more aggressive player. And then obviously a lot of people think of him as the DT Blink guy at BlizzCon. And he's totally capable of doing some weird stuff, but I think that might be a little too weird. That probably isn't worth the delay on your technology. And Bunny doing typical Terran things, you know. Who even cares? Who even cares? And there is the robotics base. So we got the strategies chosen here, guys. This is going to be nothing for approximately a minute and a half. And then Bunny will attack. We'll see what happens at that point. Bunny not the one to usually go into a very, very passive TVP. So I am totally expecting him to go into the attack. And he knows exactly what his opponent is doing. Sometimes the Korean Terrans, basically they're the only ones, will go into a Raven against a Phoenix Colossus opener. But it was already very dangerous. There was obviously pitfalls of doing that, even though they did do it. And now it's even more questionable. The Phoenix can absolutely kill the Raven, and the Raven doesn't automatically get Interference Matrix. So you wasted an extra 50-50. Not too bad, but still. On a unit that might not work. So that's definitely not what Bunny's doing. He has just swapped over, done the most optimal build possible into his 3-1-1. Well, he factory expanded instead of 1-rax expanded, but still. No Widowmine drop to mix things up there. No tanks having to be produced because you knew for a fact it wasn't going to be an early attack from Classic, and it certainly wasn't going to be like a Twilight Council Blink Stalker attack, that's for sure. Tanks can still be helpful against a Colossus-based Protoss because obviously tanks have range. They can take the Colossus on, but you can still have some usage of them. That's just not what Bunny did. Bunny going for two medevac drops immediately, though. Very bold, very bold. This would be less bold if he knew exactly where the Phoenix were, and they are about to reveal themselves, so now he knows for a fact the Phoenix will not be in position. But we have lots of other spotters. Army taking a forward position on the ramp as it should. Probe scouting for the other the direction, I suppose. Pylon scouting that direction. Unfortunately... Oh, no, there it is, yeah. This pylon scouting exactly for this, a drop. But what is still unfortunate is that the Phoenix were out of position. They will not be able to stop the medevacs from unloading. Only a single stalker warp pin is not particularly helpful. And this is doing an okay amount of damage. Keep in mind that there might not be a retreat for the Terran. So they do need to do more damage if they plan on losing everything here. Another Phoenix goes down. Oh, and the other army that I forgot about actually matches up with the attack. Wonderful timing there from Bunny, who also has some crucial reinforcing medevac coming in. Many of his units were injured, but all the Phoenix are dead. All the fodder units are dead. Just a single Immortal and 2 Colossus holding on here without a shield battery for Classic. Classic in a ton of trouble. Another stim on the Marauders will force them to be one shot by the 2 Colossus, but ultimately too many Terran units. This is a tremendous amount of damage for a very low commitment Terran push. It wasn't a 2-base all-in. He didn't pull the SCVs, is what I'm talking about. And Classic lost probes, he lost very expensive slow-building units, and he lost his Phoenix. So he has so many problems to worry about. Colossus is going to get focus fired. Still no shield battery. Classic's been trying to rebuild that just to give him some kudos. He didn't forget, but it's just, oh, a little micro there from the Marauder. Classic does not want to admit defeat because that's a frustrating way to lose, right? Like, he didn't feel like he did something terribly, terribly wrong, but he was slightly out of position, and then he didn't actually know about or was able to predict the exact timing of the secondary force. I mean, it just sucks because you really were just a 4 seconds away from defending. Maybe a bit sloppily, but you probably would have defended. I mean, Classic, he's lost 27 probes at this point. He knows he's dead. He knows. He doesn't want to admit it, but he knows. Okay. There we go, GG. Bunny wins with his first push. Very bold decision making. It was a bit of a gamble, but it really worked out timing-wise, because first there was the timing of the Phoenix revealing themselves, so the medevacs had like a perfect green light, and then there was a timing of the second attack. That was really, really good. So well deserved there for Bunny, but Classic, well, I might have a very different plan for the second game. Game 2, lickety splits. Top right, Classic. Bottom left, Bunny. I mean, Phoenix Colossus, despite possibly being a safer option, I suppose, you know, when you think of ways that you have to control the game as a Protoss player, sometimes just keeping your Phoenix and Colossus at home can feel like one of the easier things to do. But when we're talking about the professionals, that's clearly not the thing they can do. They have to do a little bit of scouting with the Phoenix, they have to do a little bit of harassment with the Phoenix, and they have to keep their Colossus well positioned and not concaved upon and stuff like that. But it, you know, sometimes can feel like a safe opening, because played well, it covers your bases. But then there's games like that where it feels like an incredibly fragile opening. And at the end of the day, I do think it is fragile. It is something that is sturdy if you don't drop it. It's great to look at if you don't drop it, and it shatters completely. And that's what happened in that last game. It shattered completely. 5 seconds difference on the Phoenix on top of those medevacs could have been a world of difference, because then he's a little bit faster, has a little bit more units defending his third Nexus, and then the secondary attack doesn't quite kill everything. It doesn't quite snowball, whatever. But it is what it is. When you think about a Twilight Council opener, you might say, like, well, the units are sturdier, and you have more of them, so you can also spread them around maybe a little bit more. But then I think of how much you have to be active on the map, and how many games we witnessed Protoss players lose because they had to keep their Stalkers at home to defend a possible Widowmine drop, but then also miss out on an incoming tank push. So, I mean, Protoss is just kind of hard to play, I guess. A lot of empathy for them, a lot of sympathy. But, yeah. It just really sucks to lose a game like that, where you're pretty sure all you needed was one tiny thing fixed, and this would not have snowballed nearly as bad. But not just to focus on Classic's mistake, but also to give credit to Bunny's style of play. Not every Terran player would face a Phoenix Colossus opener, get the full scout, which was actually a really nice thing for him to just immediately get, but then also immediately go into 2 medevac drop. Not spend any time building tanks like I was talking about, or going into a Widowmine drop, which you really shouldn't against Phoenix, but some people do. Just go right into the 2 medevac drop with your units, Sim, Combat Shields, and Marauder Slow, and hope you circumvent the Phoenix. And then they get the confirmation that you did circumvent the Phoenix because they appeared on your side of the map. I mean, also really fortunate timing for Bunny. But then Bunny also doesn't just do the 2 medevacs and say, well, that was my pressure. He also had his reinforcements coming. And I'm just saying that Terran players don't always do that. That is a way you could copy, and it is a way that you could lose every single game that you try it. And you could also copy someone who's more defensively minded, and maybe win more of your TVPs. And that absolutely worked that game. In this game, we have ourselves a cheeky build. It is a 3CC build before factory. So basically the greediest thing you can do in any matchup. The Classic, I guess what Bunny is thinking is that Classic is unlikely to do something that would kill him. And as far as things that directly kill a 3CC, they're actually kind of limited. The 4-gate sounds like the easiest thing to predict would kill a 3CC build. Because you're like, oh, well, that's early aggression, and that's really quite dedicated. That should kill someone who's being greedy, right? Not necessarily. We've seen a couple of players, like Clem, for instance, because he faces so many 4-gates, right? He has done 3CC versus Max Pax. Max Pax has 4-gated against him, and then the timing just barely works out so that Clem gets enough units. Now, I think that's when he goes 3 barracks, no factory, but my point is, like, it's not guaranteed to kill it anyway. But the first problem is usually scouting the damn thing. The Protoss player can get a little bit of scouting on the front lines with the Adepts, which we have seen, but there's only so much to tell right there. You don't know what's hiding up in the main base. More bio units, a tank, a cyclone, a mediv, I don't fucking know. You can get an observer, which is obviously the best possible thing, and that is eventually going to scout it, but it scouts it after you've already chosen your build, and your build doesn't, it doesn't all in. Well, I'm sure there's some 2-base Colossus all in. I should take that back, but it doesn't usually be aggressive. Actually, losing the observer is kind of painful too. So, better to scout it now than at minute 7 or 8, of course. But it's say the Terran player has 100% gotten away with it. And now Classic is just going to need to accommodate for it. He did his thing, he did his build, and he's now scouting that it is 3cc, and it seems like his choice is to... Third Nexus, obviously, pretty fast, where if you third Nexus fast with this opener, then sometimes you spread yourself too thin, I guess. Not this type of game, and then to stop producing Phoenix. Not going to bother with Phoenix, apparently. He has the resources. He has the supply, but nope. I like this potential harassment scouting pylon, but this Marine looked at it and said, I don't care. Uh-huh. Alright, you do you. I'm actually a little surprised that thing is only on move, not attack move. Possibly on purpose, though, right? Anyway, we do have a little move out here. I like this little move outs, because in the same vein that Classic doesn't have an all-inning army, Bunny doesn't have an army that's impressive right now. It's still building up. Although I would say if he gets positioning, it's impressive. And the drop coming out just puts the army on the map, and that is already a better situation for Bunny. Basically, I didn't mind Classic pushing out, because if he found the army just hold up in its own natural, the Colossus gets to be a big bully, with the force fields helping it as well. Now the medevacs are coming out. That's a little bit more dangerous. But the medevacs have progressed quite far away from the base. And Classic might have actually done this really smartly, actually. Like, now the medevacs, if they return home, they're too late. If they go for the attack, it's too late to really do equalizing damage, probably. Because he certainly saw it. We can all agree on that, right? That pylon definitely saw it. Alright, well, Bunny's natural is going to drop into the natural, and Classic is going to recall instantly, so maybe he didn't. Maybe he didn't, or this was his plan. I mean, he delayed the third CC. He killed 4 SCVs. And he is going to completely clean up the drop, as this army did not try to escape as soon as it saw the recall. Because if it had, I'm pretty sure 2 Phoenix would not have chased it down. At least one of the medevacs would have lived. So, all in all, good for Classic. He lost 8 probes versus 4, but he killed so much of his opponent's army. He does have this technology, the Colossus, that is still quite scary if the Terran forces can't get a big concave. The Viking count is only now being built up. Should be very scary at this point. No instant reinforcements is the good news for Bunny, as he knows he's about to defend against this army. There's not much else he can do besides try and get the best concave possible. That is a decent amount of units. The reinforcements coming in. Even that Cyclone on the right side really helping to distract the Colossus shots. Stalkers even going the wrong direction. This is getting all types of awkward. Still a good concave for the Terran, but the Colossus thus far remain untouched. And the multiple stims are kind of hurting some of the army. Medivac's also not healing the right side is a big bummer, because that right side is actually kind of carrying through. A couple of Medivacs healing that. These Marauders still kicking. Unfortunately, not the case. Only 2 Marauders. 1 Marauder that is barely going to be saved is going to be left over. And Bunny did not have the hold that he was hoping for. Classic's 2 Colossus standing strong, about to be reinforced with a 3rd Colossus as well. Bunny also doing a build that just entirely moved on from the upgrades. Is that... Really? That's how late you get an upgrade in this build? Damn. Also something that I think we would usually just predict the Terran player to have +1 right now. Not the case. An SCV pull could still be very effective with the Marauders trickling in here. 9 Marauders, if they were full health, could do something. But even then, maybe not enough. Just enough Zealots without charge to soak up the damage. Enough Stalkers to help out a little bit more. The Colossus are finally falling thanks to the Vikings getting some free shots here, and Bunny is going to go chasing. He is going to kill the 2nd Colossus, but the 3rd might just win out the battle on the ground, but obviously can't shoot the high ground. Okay, there we go. Pylon ends up warping in some crucial Stalkers. Bunny, although he does push that back, still lost 15 SCVs in the process, as Classic is saturated on his 3rd base and is now reaching towards that 4th. Upgrades will even up in about 20 seconds too. Classic is not going to stop pressuring Bunny, hoping to always catch him in a more awkward position without the medevac energy, without the heals, without the concave. But he does have to be careful. The Wind of Mines being a problem pretty consistently. No observer on the front line since the first one was scanned and killed. This army is more fragile than it can appear. 3rd CC needs to be lifted, dude. Oh, Jesus, yeah. It also needs to be lifted to get the most concave possible. Now 3 Vikings coming in. Mule leading the charge. Hell yeah, but Zealots now have charge as well. And they are pretty freaking good at just tanking so much of the Marauder damage. The Marines do end up bursting through the charge lots, and now we're getting good concave on top of the remaining army. Slow warp in's not going to be particularly helpful for Classic, but I think his Colossus, being as alive and healthy as they are going to win the day once more, as the Medivacs are out of juice. They are not healing. And honestly, a lot of these battles have come down to how the Medivacs have been used, but that is going to be it. Classic, with the relentless aggression on Bunny's 3rd, finds the ticket and will tie up the series. In the bottom left, we have Classic, and in the top right, it is Bunny. Bunny actually pretty close to defending, really. I mean, it was a interesting decision from Classic to, I thought, see the 2 Medivacs. That is my presumption. And then to still attack. He basically waited out the time which the Medivacs would be too far away to possibly have unloaded to surround him. And then also at a time which the Medivacs would be in that awkward, well, going back doesn't really help me, and attacking is kind of too late. And then he gets even a kind of trap set up as he recalls and kills the entirety of Bunny's army. Not a decision I would say often is found. Either you would have seen the Medivacs be scouted, and then Classic, the Protoss player, go immediately into the attack. You know, because they're like, oh, there's so many units are missing, let's go. Or they would have said, okay, well now it's a little weird because my army's not that big, and the Medivacs could have dropped, unloaded somewhere that I didn't see them. They could appear on my side of the map, and my recall could be bad, because sometimes recalls are bad. Sometimes you recall, and then the Marauders are right in front of the Colossus, and the Colossus gets taken down first and foremost. I mean, it seems like a risky play, but then apparently Classic was in total control the entire time. Then after that, Bunny still had a solid chance to defend. If that position wasn't as awkward as it was, if some of the Medivacs had helped all angles of the attack as opposed to being choked in on one side, it's absolutely a pet peeve, I think, of Terran players. Could have been different. But now Bunny is tied up against his opponents. Classic did go back-to-back Phoenix Colossus, kind of changed the way that he approached the build, of course, once he saw that it was 3rd CC, but will he do it again? It is a factory expand this time around from Bunny, so certainly not the quick 3cc build. And that made sense to float the 3rd CC to a different spot. Probably would have, actually. I think the problem is that Bunny thought he could handle things and was always just shy of actually being able to. If he had immediately forfeited, immediately looked at that army and said, oh shit, like I can't defend that whatsoever. Then he lifts, then you know, he has the high ground to work with and a pretty good concave there too, but then maybe he never gets 3rd back down and he's locked in on 2 bases and it's still kind of awkward. Who knows? But I know that in this game, we have another Stargate. And we could have a change over into Twilight Council first. That is really the only interesting change that could happen from this point. But I would like it. The conditioning has worked at this point. Bunny, without a direct scout, should be thinking, Phoenix Colossus again? Phoenix Colossus again? Phoenix Colossus again? This Reaper is going to get in to see the Phoenix, yes. And kill a probe. Heyo. Kills a probe, but then sacks itself to get that scout that it was missing. It sees that it is Phoenix, but again, it could be Phoenix Charge. Okay, it's not. I think Phoenix Charge is very fun, and I think Classic had a lot of fun gateway-based games as well, but whatever, man. Whatever. So anyways, Bunny should be most prepared for the Phoenix Colossus, but with a little tiny, okay, what if it is charge? Not going to go for the Medivac drop once again, adding on the Tech Lab, swapping them over. Very, very, very similar to the first game. In fact, it is identical. Down to the 2 Adepts from the Protoss, and then the Cyclone, I think, from the Terran, I think? The move out was a little bit different. Might have scared Classic, as he does not know what his opponent is doing besides a factory expand. And Bunny could do some type of tank push. You'd want to be wary of that. Which always sends the, that's the Phoenix conundrum that I was trying to explain previously that maybe I didn't totally elaborate on. But for the Phoenix, you know, you do want to maybe keep them at home and feel super, super safe, sure, but then on the other hand, you usually want to get scouting and damage done with them, harassment done, particularly on that scouting note. You know, you can not scout whatsoever with the Phoenix and then just kind of hope you know what they're going to do, and then suddenly you have an army in front of your face, which you're not prepared for, and that sucks. Or you could even do a scout with a Phoenix that then means the Phoenix aren't at home to defend a Widowmine drop or the double medevac drop of the first game. So it just... They have a lot of jobs. They can't do them all simultaneously. And so we do have the fragility. What ended up killing Classic in the first game, being slightly out of position and then having a snowball effect, which I think is just very unlikely to happen on this map. I'm not exactly sure about the rush distance change. Just gut feeling. I don't think Bunny would have nearly the same exact like timing, basically, as the first game, in which he dropped, sped over to the third, and then reinforced with his army. I don't think that timing works out quite as well here. Maybe he's also wary of it, because I think he's actually pushing out with this army sooner. Okay, he's just pushing out with everything in the same direction, so that is a change. The Adept is only going to see the Cyclone and a couple of Marines. Its vision as a shade is not particularly large. This Observer, though, absolutely clutch, sees the right side army and the medevac drops. That is absolutely perfect. A scan on the third reveals the Phoenix are elsewhere, and look at that, they are on top of your medevacs, but Bunny actually positioned them in a very safe location. Could unload behind the rocks. He won't know about the Observer, but he probably has an inkling of it. Maybe even trying to zoom to get the ripples showing, but that is already a very, very good Observer. He deserves a treat. It's such a drastic difference compared to the first game. And he had everything he needed in the locations that he needed it. You even saw him move his first Colossus over to the left because he was afraid that perhaps the medevacs would have unloaded just to go into the natural. Can also be a problem, of course. But now Bunny is just looking for that one attack up the gut while getting his third CC down location. Classic without any form of harassment, run by potential. Has all of his army back at home as well. He is attempting to get to a fourth base to the right side, I think. I predict with the minerals being mined out. So I might just find that he actually likes being able to respond to a Terran army off to the right. Which I think has some merit too. Nice Adept scouts. Wonderful use of non-observer scouting, right? Because he only has so many observers. In fact, that one did get killed. It was scanned or moved or whatever it was. So this army on the right isn't going to find too much or is it actually? Okay, a couple more force floats do come down. All right. And even the pylon kind of a distraction, but the natural is also under attack. Just a few units shy, a few seconds shy of responding in time. But it does look like, with especially the Phoenix coming through, Bunny is not going to find a lot of damage. Marines just attempting to gun down as many probes as possible before their timely death. Yeah, 6 isn't too bad. But triple medevacs now into the main base. Bunny just throwing units every which way, hoping that Classic misdirects one of the crucial units here. A Colossus, his Phoenix, the Stalkers, whatever it is. Also going to be a scout on what Classic seems to be in love with recently, which is the fast transition over into Fleet Beacon. Now, these units can't really escape so well because there's so many Phoenix, and that's what really makes this type of play dangerous against Phoenix. You start throwing everything every which way. Yeah, maybe you do distract and overwhelm the Protoss player, or maybe you have no escape and lose everything and haphazard attempts to end the game. And I do think we are looking at the latter. Bunny might have 1-1 upgrades to 0-0, but he is down 20 overall supplies, still losing more critical units, critical marauders, and Bunny is now in a lot of trouble, full on escaping back to his home base. Third is turning into an orbital, but clearly not mining, so it's not exactly the best economy anyway. He's trying to get to a second starport, he's trying to get to Vikings, but you don't just have the Colossus to worry about, you also have the Phoenix. So you need a decent amount of Vikings, really, if you want to try and take it on air to air. No, more likely you take a big concave again against this type of army, and that's just not going to happen. He has 8 Marauders, that's not particularly impressive. Third command center will never become an orbital. It is actually going to die if SCVs don't come over to help out. That is burning right now. And Bunny is now down 40 overall supply. Classic also able to go into his carrier transition, no problem. Usually there's much more of a problem, a much scarier point for the carrier transition. You got so many resources invested in the capital ships that might not even be particularly effective. You know, the carriers and the interceptors, when they're at low count, do get kind of bodied by Marines, but now you can just safely get into it. And now the carriers will arrive on the front lines, and maybe the Marines will kill the interceptors, but that's still not good for the Terran player. Would be doing it all while being held up on the two bases. Classic, I guess, isn't going to overstay his welcome, although I think he really could. He had such a dominant position, having the Terran have to use their own choke. Force fields could have come down. The Vikings are growing in numbers, sure, but they still have to deal with the Phoenix as well. Like Classic chooses the safe path forward. Goes back home. Combines forces with the carriers, continues to get some upgrades, well, finally getting some upgrades. It's the first Forge upgrade on the way. No 7X core upgrade, no air upgrade as of yet. I do believe he gets it. There it is, yeah. Just as I was looking for it. Fourth Nexus, also about 80% done. Now, Bunny will finally get his third CC down and running, but he's down 20 workers, down 10 army supply. Really, the only advantage he has are the upgrades. 1-1 is 0-0. He does also have EMPs. That'll be nice. That's nice. And 9 Vikings is a, you know, it's a better number, that's for sure. But I would still say that 9 Vikings is a little too low to handle even just the Colossus. Now, obviously there's a little more back and forth when it comes to that dynamic, but I mean as far as what is ideal, kind of the ideal is to be able to one-shot a lot of these units with the Vikings so that you kill the Colossus before they even shoot at you. So you dance around and kill the Colossus before your Marauders even engage. And 9 Vikings isn't even really that confident against Colossus. And keep in mind, the Phoenix will be soaking up some of that damage or killing some of the Vikings, whatever it is. And it's the type of army, if again you were depending on air versus air, as many Vikings as possible, basically. Oh, freebie kill on a carrier. Oh, almost. EMP's coming down on the Stalkers, though. Now on top of the Immortals and the Sentries as well, but only after Guardian Shield is activated. And they still have plenty of energy. I thought it was on the Sentry, but I just am blind, apparently. I gotta applaud Bunny's confidence here. He does have an army that is very microable. The Viking range is their greatest asset. He's going to take down the Phoenix, and this might be an opportunity to retreat and let the Vikings try and tackle the air by themselves, but he is not retreating. He is sticking to it, but he came in at a lower supply and was just incapable of truly dealing with the Colossus. Also, a couple of Immortals in there to really punch against the Marauders. I mean, maybe he had a lot of confidence in his 1-1 upgrades, or maybe he just knew he was screwed either way. But that is going to be Classic taking a 2-1, which means that the winner's match is going to be a PvP. That's not supposed to happen. That's against the rules. And the loser's match will be a TVZ. And now we have the illegal matchup in the winner's match. PvP, top left Classic, bottom right stats. Classic winning against Bunny was not a stupid thing to think. That, of course, could have happened. But Stats winning against Dark legitimately surprises me. Especially because Dark didn't, I think, play in any, you know, abnormal way, in a way that I went, oh, well, that's not your strong suit. What are you doing? But that means with both Protosses winning, we get ourselves a PvP. Possibly the only one with GSL this season. We'll find out. I don't actually know what the C and D groups consist of, but if it ends up being the only one, I would not be surprised. Now, the history between the two might be kind of weird. Okay, maybe a little, because I was going to say, with Stats being in the military, you know, is there going to be a huge gap and then just suddenly, you know, 1 or 2 series after? And not quite, but kind of. We've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 5. We got 5 matches before this that were played in 2023, 2024, and then before that, all the way back to 2018, because Classic went to military and Stats went to military. So, one after the other, I don't remember which order. It's been a long time that they were, I guess, at the top of their game and battling each other. But here they are at the top of the group, battling each other, and I think I heard a probe just die. How embarrassing. Oh my god, Classic lost a probe. Oh my god. What a loser. No, but seriously, that's actually really, really bad that Classic lost his scouting probe. The other things that a scouting probe would want to do can be seen with Stats' probe. So it's still getting scouting done. It scouts the second pylon. It scouts the units popping out of the gateways because it plants down a pylon or whatever it wants to, or it just sticks around until it sees it. It can scout even the third pylon, actually, intentions, I suppose. So they'll usually that is the Nexus third pylon, and probably something else that I'm forgetting right now. But the point is, you want that probe as long as possible, and generally you also get to save it. Now, in this case, Stats left it be at home as long as possible, but because it does seem like he was wary, correctly wary, of Classic not going for an expansion. Stats was keeping his probe in there as long as possible for that reason. He is absolutely right. And Stats is going into a very safe opener Soccer Century because he knows that his opponent's going to be the sneakier, more aggressive one. Apparently, he is right. Now, that's kind of a default when you're talking about Stats. Whoever he's facing is kind of default the more aggressive one, but especially Classic and especially PvP as a matchup. So Hallucination will confirm probably what Stats was already suspicious of. That is a 1 base, 3 gates robo. All back at home. So Classic, eyes closed, face first. He has, his kind of an idea is what opponent has done here. As he did see the pylon and the shield battery, that's a really good tell that there is a Nexus. But he had missed all that probe scouting information. Doesn't even care. He was going to attack you anyway. Far more important is that Stats knows that Classic is going to attack him. But it's not all in. It is all produced at home, so nothing to sacrifice if you do decide to macro instead. And that seems to be Classic's plan. Now, the thing is that Stats is going to have to consider this as an all-in for an extended period of time, because he doesn't even really want to use another hallucination, since he wants to have as many force fields as possible to help against this. So, you see the second pylon is the last thing you saw. Doesn't really tell you he's not dedicating to it. Ah! Stats almost loses the soccer, but we'll run back to the shield battery. And it's really difficult as well to consistently get scouting on what is being built up here. As you're reacting to the warp prism, you also don't want to over... Wait, is he actually doing this? Okay. I was going to say the stalkers don't want to get too committed to the front lines, in case Classic was waiting there with an Immortal, but Classic dedicated his Shades and his Warp Prism to the main base, and it was an excellent defense by Stats. I mean, I just... That's why I was kind of shocked. I was like, Classic dedicates to it, and I could see how it would do damage, but then it did 2 probes of the damage, and that's not a lot. Stats of the force field of the Adepts came into the main base, and then his units were in position as he saw the Warp Prism plan. Very nicely done. And now, as he has kind of gotten the gist, like, hey, that's a lot of not units are throwing my way, is going to spend his potential force field, I guess, in Hallucination. And he will confirm what he's probably already suspicious of. This guy actually built a Nexus. But seeing that it is already done and already saturated is still something that you couldn't really ever predict. The timing at which they chose to get a Nexus would probably be very hard to figure out based off the front lines alone, I guess. Again, something else could be warping in over here with the Warp Prism. Ooh, that was a little dangerous. A little. Stats has gone into the exact same thing as the opponent. You do the exact same thing as your opponent, but you have a friend's advantage. Typically, that works out for you. But it also means that if your opponent didn't dedicate and went for their own Nexus, and you had to stop building probes to make sure you could get your own Immortal and to make sure that you could get your second shield battery, well, then things actually kind of match out. Actually, very even. There is a 10 army supply difference right now, but one that could be made up for with a shield battery. You can see the income did still favor Stats slightly, as he had maybe a point, a couple more probes, right? But now we have a much faster third Nexus. Stats did prioritize his additional 2 gateways versus Classic, obviously starting with 3. Which means that Stats could actually attack. And since he has a War Prism on the front lines, I'm thinking that is his choice. No shield battery ready for Classic, so this army deficit is a really big problem. Force field coming down every which way that we look, though. An aggressive blink forward gets after the War Prism. Classic, you are insane. Both Immortals of Stats are still alive, all without shields, but they are still packing that damage. One of them goes down, the other one is totally healthy. Stats doesn't have instant reinforcements, but he's got the stronger army. He's got some harassment. And Classic, you are a bold son of a gun for going for that blink forward, but it was a desperate one, hoping that the lack of War Prism might cause Stats to be a little shy. It did not. Alright, Classic is going to ultimately lose this game, but I wouldn't say it was off of his, you know, all-in start that ended up not being all-in. I really do blame, well, 1, the lack of shield battery, and 2, his total inability to find any damage, really, with the harassment. I mean, that can be very difficult to defend against. The Adepts and the War Prism in the main, and Stats did a very good job against it. But GG's! Stats wins game 1. In the bottom right of Golden Aura, it is Classic, down a game. Top left, it is Stats. I believe Stats is not on a team. Classic's on Twisted Minds. Yeah, and Stats has not been picked up again. Technically, he was on a Freak of Freaks until January 1st. I do expect that'll change, as there are so many teams looking for, frankly, cheap single point getters for the upcoming Esports World Cup. And Stats is a contender, especially if he does well in this GSL. Alright, then he gets his chances increased to actually make it to the Esports World Cup. He's certainly not going to get there based off of global standings right now, and I don't think he could get there based off of global standings. It'd be a surprise if he did, I guess, because he was like number 46 or something coming into Katowice. But winning GSL or getting top 2, whatever it is, getting a better seeding if he does decide to go to Dallas, like those are still possible to actually get him a slot into it. Anywho. Classic also would be a contender for that, and a lot of people's eyes are on that prize and almost singular, you know. You do want to prep for whatever tournament you're facing next week. You want to prep for Dallas, you want to prep for the regionals, but all kind of really with the intention to get to that Esports World Cup, which promises to have the biggest prize pool in StarCraft 2's history, which I cannot disclose, but it is pretty freaking big. Now, our PvP it's going the way of PvP you would expect, and Classic is going to be the aggressor. Shock. Sacre bleu. Stats is going to be able to figure this out pretty quickly by the lack of second pylon, but then you don't know if they are really using the second pylon or not. Stats could try and send another probe out the scout, but you don't see that very often at all. Basically, I mean, it is a lack of resources from an additional probe out and about scouting. But you also are capable of defending without knowing exactly what's on the way. It would be nice, though. And a lot of Protosses at this point absolutely would have sent this scouting probe around in an attempt to find something. But Stats really likes to keep his probe in the main until it dies. And maybe this is a against Classic thing. That means that the best they'll do is be able to see if it's an in-base whatever, which, you know, last game it was an in-base 3-gate robo. But he knows second pylon's missing, so that's so unlikely that the additional structures will come down at home. And then he could maybe see the units popped out of the gateways. The only thing he saw was a stalker, actually. The sentry was the choice, as Classic is not going into a real all-in here. He is just proxy stargating. And the sentry, I mean, it's a lot of gas, but it is only the one. Stalker's also a lot of gas. We're not talking about maybe the quickest Oracle, I guess, but it's definitely... Oh, hallucination into the Oracle is going to be potentially awkward. Stat's going to be focusing on microing on the front lines. Might just not even pay attention to the blinky on his minimap. Oracle's also still bad against Oracles. Sentry's still bad against Oracles, my bad. There's the Stalker micro that I was talking about, and hey, it's pretty freaking good. Stalkers with 3... Jesus, Stats with 3 Stalkers to 1. 3 Stalkers to 0. And actually going to get into the main base, but the Oracle kills 2 sentries. Only 2 extra probes, though. I mean, this is really weird. It is awkward. Stats is going to be able to kill at least 2 probes. He 2-shots them with 2 Stalkers, but he is actually just going to skedaddle. Probably should have killed the probes over trying to kill that Stalker. But we're talking about a very split-second decision alongside trying to stop the Oracle from doing further damage. He had to chase it down into his natural. So, a little awkward for both sides. Stats comes out on top as far as the workers, though. He's got 3 more workers than his opponent. Perhaps he actually got a Chrono win before Classic did, or something, because he did lose more probes, so that's what I'm going to say that it was. But Classic still has Oracle, and Oracles, plural at this point, so he pierces through the shield battery. And so Stats will have to be very careful about that. Keeping his Stalkers at home for sure. Classic going into Twilight Council, obviously a little bit later than his opponents, but really not all that much later for having the benefit of 2 Oracles, the potential of 2 Oracles as far as scouting, stasis traps, and the ability to come by later and kill probes, which is less effective than earlier killing probes, but it's still good. It's an interesting little Stalker hit squad there, hoping to distract a little bit more, I guess. Piling him down for Classic. He could opt to go into a more dedicated 2-base aggression. He actually was the one in the last game to go for 3 bases immediately. And then Stats was also planning on going to 3 bases, but he had 4 gateways versus 3. He had more army with the way the game went as well. Classic, yeah, he could go into 4 gateways now. Then 3rd Nexus. Focus all of his resources not into additional probe production, but into additional Stalker production. That is exactly what he's doing. Yep. He has 3 gateways at home, and that is something that Stats Hallucination might be able to see if Stats had a Hallucination, but remember he lost his sentries. So it'd be deceiving anyway, because 2 gateways are coming in via proxy. Stats has no idea about that. So if he had any idea about a later 3rd Nexus, he'd be getting increasingly more suspicious. But without that Hallucination, thanks to the sentries dying, he doesn't even get a chance to see that. And oh my goodness, a hidden Nexus, because why not? Why not, you know? Classic gets a Nexus, but then when if Stats defends this attack, whoops-a-daisy, he's gonna go, okay, well maybe, you know, let's counter-attack and get your 3rd Nexus. Oh my god, you don't have a 3rd Nexus. Oh my god, you were so all in and I defended it. Wow, I'm the greatest. And then he's gonna have a totally wrong perception of the game. Hallucination from Red Protoss finally coming out. Like I said, when it sees lack of 3rd Nexus, it's going to know something's up, but well, it already does. Stalkers head into the main base, but really not that many more Stalkers. In fact, far less. Stats, despite going for the 3rd Nexus faster, has actually been dedicating a lot into his Stalker production. Very, very consistent about that. Stats will eventually fall behind. He just has fewer gateways, of course, but he's been very consistently producing Stalkers. No big gap in the production that left him woefully underprepared. I think I've said that 4 times this cast. Now this gold Nexus is the real kicker behind everything. Like, Classic can continue to be the aggressive player, even if he knows that he's not really going to win the game off of this. There's nothing stopping him from being on the front lines. But behind it all, he is getting a very cheeky base, and Stats has no idea. Stats is actually trying to add additional technology, +1 attack, as well as his charge. That charge won't actually be that useful immediately. 3 Zealots, even with charge, kind of get just out-microed by the Stalkers, right? And their tankiness only makes up for so much. In fact, I think Classic does win right now. Yeah. But one problem for Stats is that he didn't have a shield battery. This one only just finished. This one as well. So he did eventually get outnumbered by the Stalkers. That was inevitable with the R knowledge anyway. But Stats also was aware it was a 2-base committal. And I guess his shield batteries were just never allowed to get up and running. Now they are here, but shield battery overcharge was just used. And he's still down 8 workers. His +1 finishes, that's good news. And eventually the charge lots will add a lot of value. When you get to about 8 charge lots, then they actually are almost guaranteed to get at least a couple of swipes off. Then that's a really thick barrier that has to be killed first. Like, they do eventually help, but sometimes you see these mass stalker wars where the handful of zealots added in just look absolutely useless. It's a bold move from Classic. He kind of splits his attention into a couple of buildings. The Zealots will get on top of a lot of the Stalkers off to the right side, as well as off to the left. Reinforcements came in. And this is much more difficult for the Stalker-based player to micro against, right? Which is the best thing they have against the Zealots. And the Zealots' best thing is that they don't have to be microed. So that was maybe not the best idea. What did he kill in the process? Just a shield battery, actually. I can see why that could be important, but that probably wasn't worth the split of units. But does it really matter? What is worth? What does that even mean when you have a gold base up and running? Well, it still means something, I would say. We do have a about 700 resource loss difference at this point as Classic is jumped upon. Stats actually having a moment here. The charge lot's doing a wonderful job body blocking, so Stats even feels comfortable blinking forward. And Classic, I mean, is he going to be able to hold, actually? He's got a shield battery at the very least, but he's down in Stalkers. He's way down in Zealots. And Stats is dangerously close to winning this game, this series, 2-0. Shield battery overcharge, always going to be a little too intimidating to force the issue. That will buy Classic an extra couple of seconds. But he is still out-upgraded as well. He has a smaller army. He has a lower worker count, I guess, technically. And he does have less upgrades. He's got that gold nexus, but it has also been found out and will eventually be killed. It's already running out of minerals anyway. Classic, I do believe, is going to lose this game. Yeah, I don't know. Stalker's in a choke, actually. Charge lots are getting up close and personal, but not all of them actually being able to attack. Probe's going to have to be pulled here. +2, though, also finishing 4 stats. And I believe Classic is, in fact, going to lose out. He has no Dark Shrine. He has no Disruptors. And that is game. Stats wins out in the winners match against Classic and is the first one to advance. We have the elimination match in front of us now. In the bottom left, it is Bunny. And in the top right, it is Dark. Bunny being in the losers match, okay, that could have happened. Classic is very strong. And Bunny is really hit or miss lately. It feels like sometimes he's really cool and really good, and other times he's one of the easier opponents for some of the players. But Dark is pretty freaking consistent. You know, he has his ups and downs. I wouldn't say he's as consistent as a Cyril, who's one of the most consistent players in the world, or like Innovation, I guess. But he is consistent in his results a lot of the time. Maybe he makes a round of 8s like usual, but then that round of 16 series was all over the place. Yeah. But as far as the results goes, he's usually very, very consistent. So you think coming into the first round of the GSL, which at this point is round of 16, and does still have a lot of groups that are like, well, clearly those two and clearly not those two, you'd think that Dark would just be in the winners match. Maybe I'm just really, really, really biased, but that's certainly what I thought. And instead, he loses out in a macro PvZ, ultimately. He did try and attack and be the aggressor and all-inner and all that good stuff against Stats, but it didn't work. But it didn't work enough that it still went into a macro game, in which Dark absolutely still could have won, especially that first game. But no, Stats getting the clutch factor back as well. Makes it out first in the group. So winner of this best of 3 TVZ is going to face Classic in the decider match. So either another ZVP or a TVP. Now you got a 1-Rex expand here from Bunny. We are talking about TVZ now, so just kind of rearrange my brain a little bit. Bunny did play versus Classic, and so he has shown us that style of play. Dark played against Stats. He has shown us that style of play, but they are finally meeting in a TVZ. Guaranteed not to go as long, basically. Though, As far as who is going to be the aggressive one in this matchup, that's actually kind of hard to say. Dark feels like one of the few Zerg players who will consistently all in some fashion versus Terran. Other Terrans do mix it in. Raynor doing quite a few actually in the most recent Open Cup, but Dark is the one who does it. And so, particularly on Alcyone, I feel like we see him do a Roach Ravager all in a decent amount of times. The Ling Roach Ravager that'll all in. And if Hard Lead is in the maps, I don't know if it is or not, then he does a lot of 1-1 Roach all-ins on that map as well. So Bunny is going to probably have to be certainly more apprehensive about the mid-game, early to mid-game, than a Terran would usually be. Terran generally kind of, there's a peace agreement in the first 5 minutes in TVZ. You know, many TVZs, not much happens in the first 5 minutes. And then there's usually an agreement that the Terran player gets to drop around and harass around and clean up creep spread and stuff. Not if you're facing someone who's attacking you. So a little more apprehension. A little more maybe like a safety opener. And a Hellion Banshee opener is pretty much the safest you can get. I would actually say that the 3cc Hellion Banshee opener really isn't that much less safe. And so there's a reason that we see the likes of Clem just reliably do it over and over and over again. But Bunny's actually opting for, I don't know, I consider an old school build now, which is 2-base. 1-1-1. I don't think he's going to go any further into a 2-base, to be clear. He's not quite that type of player, even though he can be aggressive. But oh, well, I was wrong about that. See? Wrong about a bunch of stuff. I still only really think of Bjorn as a 2-base Terran player, but if I had to guess who else could do it, it would be Bunny, who can be a little odd and who can certainly be very aggressive. But yeah, he adds on 2 barracks as opposed to a 3rd CC. So, really mixing things up. Now, Dark did add on a Roach Warren, but I think he saw the tech lab. Yes, he did. So he saw that it was a Banshee opener, and if he was planning on doing some type of little poke with the roaches, you know, 8 roaches and a couple ravagers, whatever it is, he probably doesn't do that anymore. Unless he's convinced that the Banshees will be out of position, I guess. But that's kind of a difficult thing to predict. Nope, just enough roaches to help out on the defense against the Hellions, then right back into drones. Maybe you do give a little bit of a panic to the Terran when you show the roaches, like, ah! But then Bunny's like, oh wait, no, I have a Banshee, I'm good. But this is also really good news for Dark because I think the Roach play against a 2-base attack is actually one of the better ways of playing against it. Any style of play from the Zerg player, Link Baneling or Roach Ravager, that's 2 you guys got, I do think works against 2 bases, of course. 2 bases for Terran versus Zerg, not really popular for a reason. It's kind of been figured out. Mostly works as a surprise. I think it works a lot versus Zerg when it comes to Bjorn's versus Zerg, because Bjorn often opts for a really difficult opener as well. But anyway, if you go straight into the 2-base attack, which is what Bunny is doing, odds are that Dark is going to have more time to even just think and be like, oh, well, not much is happening. What's going on here? Okay, is he 2-base attacking me? We're going to find it out, and then he's going to be able to build Lings, yes, but also Roaches, and most importantly, Ravagers. They're very good at buying time, and they can be very cost-effective, of course, if they don't die, as they are spellcasters. So let's see. I mean, obviously the first problem with handling a 2-base attack is knowing it is on the way. And Dark technically doesn't know. He hasn't rescouted the supply depots, the incoming army, the 3rd CC not being here, the 5 racks. He actually didn't know. So he is on 70 drones, where I think you would absolutely be okay staying at like 55 even, and then just building as many roaches as possible. 72 drones, and an infestation pit, and all your upgrades, and no metabolic boost. Sorry, no speedlings. Bunny might have actually done it. Bunny might have chosen the exact right game to bring this out on. The roaches are not prepared. No Ravagers as of yet, and the Marines are taking the opportunity when they can get it. Now, the Ravagers do finish up. Queen's trying to come in with the concave as well, but I don't know. Those tanks are firing away, and even without the combat shields that only just finished, the Marines were able to stand toe-to-toe with the roaches, and now that frontline buffer is gone. Dark, just completely unaware that this was his opponent's plan, did not properly prepare. He had a fine technology as far as roaches go. He could have gone all roaches. Speedlings are nice because they can run by, intercept reinforcements, and try and get in the backside of the tanks. Okay, sure. But you don't even need those. If he just had stopped droning and built roaches and ravagers, which maybe he still holds. Hold on here. Then I think it would have been totally okay, but wait a second. Wait a second. He had a comically high number of drones in the first place that actually losing 24 doesn't kill him. Bunny, incapable of reinforcing fast enough, didn't get the snowball that I thought he was going to get. I have moved on from this game, honestly. And even though that amount of drones would usually be, well, it's frankly game over anyway, not in a game like this. 52 workers to 42. Not great for Zerg, but it is workable. As his bank also is finally going to be expended. Doesn't need to get overlords, I guess. And things could actually still get kind of screwy. Things could absolutely get screwy. Medevac drops in the main, not going to do anything. Dark really taking back control over this game. His upgrades also finished, but not on the roaches. So it looks like his plan, or his belief, was that his opponent was also going to play a typical 3cc style, have a little poking and prodding, but no really major engagement. So he would have had time to get his infestation pit and his hive, and his Baneling Nest, and then get Megbot boosts. Metabolic boosts. Like, that's how greedy he thought he would be able to be. But anyway, you know, we eventually do move over into Ling Baneling Ravager. But not enough time to do that as of yet. Baneling Nest only just now finishing. Love the inclusion of the Infestor. I think Dark is one of the best players when it comes to making comebacks happen, especially with Roach Ravager and Infestor. The Infestor not out quite yet, though. The Ravager count not truly intimidating as of yet either. Bunny did spend some time really just building up his army. Just a couple of drops to poke, but not too much. And now is back on the front with a even army size. But he is down that upgrade. 2 tanks. Very important anchors to this push. But only to get up close and personal to that hatchery. Fungal hits the tail end of the Marines. Not super effective. But a new fear Bunny has unlocked. Ling run by is catching the reinforcements. Really nice move. The Baneling Nest is finally working on triple hooks. Hatchery does have to be healed, but it will go down. But it's not going to be worth it if Bunny loses his army. But will he? Those tanks now at 3, anchoring this push. So damn difficult to break through. Every time you think you might be close to surrounding the Terran force or winning against the pure bio force, those tanks come into play. And Dark is still in some trouble. That 3rd hatchery lost is concerning, I would say, maybe for Injex. Because actually, as far as the economy goes, he only has so many drones in the first place, you know? 53 is going to cover 3 bases, and with the 4th being up and running, he still has 3 bases. Larva, not the issue, though. It's absolutely still the actual mineral income. Bunny, I think, had even up the upgrades. Centrifugal Hook's going to come into play, but without any Banelings to really utilize it. Just one, I think, in the midst there. As Dark is trying to hold on. Once again, bringing Queens to the forefront. +2 Carapace is done. Medevacs are almost out of juice. The army is overstimmed. And the tanks have to take their sweet time unsieging and sieging up again. And Dark's going to take that time to add in crucial Ravagers. +2 melee, also going to finish, but there's just nothing on the... There's no Lings, there's no Banelings. He will finally take out a tank at the cost of a couple of his Ravagers. Certainly not ideal. I think Larva might actually be an issue. He is banking once again. He could have canceled this hatchery if he could have spent all the money they would have because of it. This is finally going to end. And finally in favor of Bunny. Which sounds right, considering how much of a bop it looked like it was going to be. But Dark really almost brought it back. He had 24 drones too many. So the fact that they died was, I guess, okay. But still, that was a very tricky situation. That spot in particular is very abusive. And Dark still was reeling from that. GG's Bunny with a Game 1 victory. So we move on to Site Delta for Game 2. In the top left, it is Dark. In the bottom right, it is Bunny. If you couldn't tell from Game 1, my belief in the 2-base TVZ is like a 1 out of 100. It's like, I only believe in it when it is Beyond. And like I was saying in that game, it's usually only because Beyond has a really difficult opener to begin with. An opener that really confuses the Zerg. Either quite literally, like they just have no idea what he's doing. Or one in which it really makes them pick and choose whether they build army or they build economy. So the Forax, for instance. The Forax can make even a very knowledgeable Zerg who knows exactly what's going on, can still make them mess up because reading the situation is still difficult. And then he goes into a 2-base and it's kind of a 1-2 punch situation. With Bunny, he did no punch. I mean, the Banshee doesn't really count. The Helens don't count. He just literally went into a 2-base build, which, as I was saying, usually gives a lot more time for the opposition to figure out something. For them to even just literally have the time to think as they do their mostly, practice part of StarCraft, just doing their build order. To actually say, okay, what is this guy doing? Well, maybe I should check. When in a more action-packed game, that can be one of the things lost in the sauce. Dark had no thoughts whatsoever about a 2-base attack, and I think it's actually very funny. He actually had 0 thoughts. He was very clearly trying to be as greedy as possible. And did not bother scouting the front, didn't bother scouting the attack path, or maybe he had a Ling and it was cleared up, but still didn't re-scout the attack path, and that Overlord in the main never tried to suicide in as an Overseer or anything. So it's a pretty perfect setup for a 2-base attack. But Bunny was the one who got away with a surprise 2-base attack. Dark is now going to be going to try that. He will technically have 2 bases, but this was an earlier pool. Well, not a super early pool, but it was an earlier one. Into the hatch and then into the Roachborn. And Bunny has yet to scout this. This Reaper is going to scout the later hatchery and then go, oh no, Lings might be on my side of the map, because they will be. And if he pulls back immediately, he'll be missing the really crucial scout, which is, in fact, that is Roaches. And that's what's happening. So, that's actually very, very concerning. The Marine handles 2 Lings, especially if it has any amount of SCV support. So the Reaper really doesn't have to pull back at this point. The fear is obviously initially that it might be 4 Lings, or even 6 Lings, or even 8. But Bunny is really going to get the same treatment as what he just did to Dark. He has 0 idea that this is on the way. Not even thinking about it. Oh my god, the Reaper timing. Oh, barely sees it, but still. But still. Very late read on this. The good news is the Cyclones pop out of a reactor, so Terrans are even stronger at dealing with early game harassment. I'm a Terran player, so I gotta give a thumbs up to that. In the old days, you'd be pretty screwed because you'd literally only be building Helnians right now. You usually wouldn't die to this, though, to be fair, because it's such a light amount of pressure. It's only 5 units. You would survive, but you wouldn't be very healthy. Now you'd probably survive pretty freaking okay, but I still would say that Dark is going to get an okay amount of damage done, to at least warrant doing this opener. I do think he needs to kill 6+ SCVs. That's my personal guess on how much damage he needs to do. He's not killing SCVs, but he is at least delaying the 3rd CC. And honestly, with Bunny still committing to a 2-base build, not a fast 3rd CC, this does actually kind of cloud the upcoming outcome, where this actually goes. So used to casting Clem with just 3 CCs every single game. So you're like, oh, okay, he delays his natural command center, but you still have 2 SCVs being produced at a time. You still have so many SCVs to transfer over to the natural and almost immediately into the 3rd after that. But the starport coming out faster is really only so helpful. A Viking appearing to take down the Overlord that gives high ground vision is... it's useful, obviously. Dark can't really commit any more without that, but, it's not all that helpful. I would massively prefer having a 3rd CC against this build. Because the Cyclones come out in the same fashion no matter what. So yeah, that is something as I said, I'm so used to casting a 3CC player. Because obviously I cast a lot of Clem, but even if you take that away, so many Terran players do opt for 3CCs a lot of the time. Bunny, just back-to-back 2 bases. So the Viking will kill another Overlord, at least 1 more. That's good news. The Banshee will follow up and ensure that the roaches or even maybe Ling run-bys won't be as much of a problem. But there's very little that Bunny can do to go harass. Cyclones are very unlikely to get damage done. I mean, if there's any amount of speedlings, which we know the speed isn't here, but if there were any amount of speedlings, Cyclones can't do anything. And the Banshee isn't even going to have Cloak, so very, very unlikely to do damage. So yeah, Dark is actually in, I think, a pretty freaking good position. His third base isn't very fast. His drone count was absolutely cut very early on, and he's only now recovering his drone count. Yes, I'm aware of that, but as I say, I really would prefer Bunny's position if he had a third CC already done. Well, anyway, moving on to the mid-game. Bunny did go for a third CC. He's not going for back-to-back two-base attacks. I do think that that first game is a real outlier. The chances of a Zerg player being that blind to a possible engagement, that greedy to a two-base all-in is very unlikely. And anyway, Bunny not going to do that here. I think that's a good choice. What Dark could do, though, is receive 1-1 missile on the way, is that he could just follow up this little pokey poke in the front, which did do, I think, a successful harass. It was a successful opener in this grand scheme of things. He could follow this up with a 1-1 Roach all-in. Something that he's really strong at, no matter what happened in the game anyway. Bunny will have a comfortable upgrade lead. He will be building tanks. This already sets him up to deal with any Roach-based play a lot better. But there is still a problem of positioning and knowledge of the incoming attack. If Dark even is going for it. Once we see an infestation pit, that kind of gives us the biggest sign he's not going to do it. Fourth base on the way. Only 5 overlords. Is he preparing for the Roach swell? I think he might just be. 66 drones. And as many roaches as the overlords are allowing him. There we go. All right. So this is going to come down to the concave. You know, Bunny should really be mindful of a possible Roach build from now on, and a possible Roach all-in. It's Dark. And if he is not thinking about it, that is 100% on him. But he is clearly thinking about it. He's got the tank production. He's got some SimCity to work with. And so far, he hasn't sent a lot of units out. You know, no medevacs flying around that now uncomfortably go back home. But I'm looking at this army, and it just doesn't look very strong. 2 tanks is wonderful, but where's the rest of the bio? This changeling is probably thinking the same thing. Dark 1-1 about to finish. His Bunny is still without combat shields. Cyclone is the first thing to see this. He's going to try and kind of use his Marines to mostly body block for the tank, but one already goes down. Third tank's not sieged up, and the Marines are only going to last so long, especially without combat shields. 5 seconds to go on that one. 2 tanks get destroyed, and already a good amount of damage, but Dark actually, without the reinforcements, is going to lose all of its Ravagers, and that is a very big loss for the Zerg. Do not underestimate that. Now it is a question of, you know, both players losing the kind of integral units to the defense and the attack. You can still sometimes overwhelm with just sheer roaches, but Ravagers are really usually what makes or breaks it. They kill the supply depots, they kill the SimCity, they kill the tanks, obviously, is the biggest thing. And generally, the idea is that they just don't die. They retreat once the roaches start to thin out. But that was not the case there. Bunny, I think, is going to survive, especially because Dark did take some time to add on a lot more drones, 9 of them. But then Dark gets to position himself into a pretty decent mid-game. In fact, even a little ahead on the upgrades, as Bunny was a tad late. Looks like Bunny recognizes this is not being committed to anymore. That's not a tremendous amount of Roach Ravager, so he is going to feel comfortable picking up a couple of medevacs and sending them off. He does unload, however, so in case the Roaches came back, I guess he could kind of even get us around. More SimCity coming up with the 4th Command Center, which I actually like. Viking kills, I think, an Overseer or something that was scouting. And the game does continue on with Dark with slightly faster upgrades and an Infestation Pit on the way. One Ravager getting caught off guard. I don't even know where he was going. Heck are you going? The medevac will continue to be bothersome, because I think otherwise... Wait. Oh, there they are. I was like, there's no way this is the army of the Terran. Otherwise, it looks like Bunny has a good army back at home. Really nice medevac scout. He boosted it forward to see what was going on. So he has that slight second reaction to defend against this, but maybe he doesn't have enough. Oh no. Oh no, he really doesn't actually. The Sim City did not keep his tank alive for that long, and this right side has been totally overwhelmed, and while I misread that, I gave Bunny's defensive chances way more credit than I should have. At the end of the day, 2 medevacs worth of units missing, and the units having to kind of spread themselves out like that did work against Bunny. And Dark will be able to win based off his aggression while also macroing. 73 drones, 4 or 5 bases, Hives on the way. Bunny had to cancel his 4th command center, so he's really not going to be heading into a late game very comfortably. Well, Dark has done it. Bunny doesn't want to give up, of course. With tanks on the high ground defending the natural, it is difficult for Dark to really push through and win the game totally and completely. But yeah, he's basically won the game. A tank even accidentally focus firing on a supply depot doesn't help, and Dark's lost 5th hatchery does not make up for this damage, especially as Bunny loses his 3rd orbital straight up. Kaboom. 17 SCPs as well. And it looks like Bunny just wants to use his army one last time. Just wants to flex his muscles a little bit. They're vanity muscles, they don't matter, but he's got really big biceps. And chicken legs. He's flexing them though. He's freaking flexing his biceps. Look at him microing around, running around like that. I'd love to give some more hype to this all-in that we're seeing before us, but Bunny is down 40 supply. And Dark is basically maxed out, coming in with a big old surround as well. The Swarm is here, and Bunny will not be easy peasy winning the elimination match. He will once again be forced to a Game 3. Now both players on their last life. In the bottom left of Solaris, we do have Dark. In the top right, it is Bunny. I thought Bunny was going to hold that second attack. It wasn't even a second all-in. That was just far after Dark had macroed and teched and all that. But no. No. The left side, 3rd base SimCity was not enough. And that was really what he was depending on to hold on to that 3rd with the limited amount of units over there. And then the right was not enough units straight up against the amount that Dark had positioned. And that was a break. That was a very successful break. Kind of a bummer, though, because I really don't believe that was a game that was no-brainer. Bunny dies with the next attack. Personally, I really don't believe that. And I feel like Bunny doesn't believe that either. I mean, Bunny is a guy that does tend to stay in games, to be fair, but sometimes when you see players, pro gamers, and plebs alike, they stay in a game that you know they lost. Sometimes it's because they actually they say they like to think things through in the game. Sometimes they say, oh, I was having fun anyway. And then sometimes it's because they can't believe it. They're frustrated because they're like, well, seriously, that was the one, and then I didn't do the thing. Oh, Jesus. Like Classic in an earlier series today, where he stayed in a game long past the point in which it was realistic he was going to win, but he did. You know, and Bunny was the one that actually got to show off his muscles while winning. Anyway, so that means that both players on the last life. Again, the winner of this faces Creator. That would be a rematch for Bunny, and then a new match for Dark. I will favor Dark forever and ever. Favor him in this final game here. I'll favor him versus Creator, but this group has mixed up a lot just by having stats get out first. No one really was predicting that. Even the diehard Protoss fans have been so beaten over the years. So constantly crushed by the failure of the race. They really, really, really want a Protoss to get first place. They have to be realistic and say, no, they won't. So I'm pretty sure even they didn't predict that. Bunny once again sticking to his 2-base 1-1-1. I mean, besides not being as economical, you obviously get the strength of it, which that it does hit a little bit faster, I guess, with the starport units. But I don't know. I mean, any RTS, apparently, not that I'm a connoisseur of RTSs necessarily, but certainly the trend in StarCrafts, and I'm certain it's the trend in other games, is that the more you play the game, the more you figure out how to defend tricky things, which means more and more becomes a economic game, becomes a macro game. 2 bases were almost impossible to defend until people figured it out, and then 3 bases were impossible to defend until people figured it out, and then map design also kind of caters to whatever is happening at that time as well, which further emphasizes 2 or 3 bases. This is interesting. Wow, I haven't seen this build in a while. Bunny's going for a Marauder Hellbat attack. You don't see this at all anymore. And that is another, I guess, actually a very good point. That's another reason I would say to go 2 bases, is that you do have some of these cheekier attacks. You know, obviously you can do it on 3 bases, but they are delayed. If you're to do exactly this off of 3cc, it'd be delayed by 30, 45 seconds, something like that. Usually is what a 3rd CC pushes off a lot of these engagements. But again, there's a reason no one does this. Like, as much as now Dark has to be really worried about an armory attack because, well, that would often come off of a 2 base 1-1-1. It's hardly a worry. Not just because Dark is adding on roaches already, which are going to still be very strong against the build, even though Marauders are included, but also because Zerg players have gotten so good at defending against the Hellbat attacks. The Marauder adds a tricky aspect in that it does slow the queens. And basically, the defense against the Hellbat attack for Zerg starts with the queens pulling back together and microing together. And Zergs almost always have their queens apart, injecting, dynamically creep spreading, all the good stuff. So that's what usually, like, is the sucker punch to this build. And it can still happen, but if Dark consolidates his queens and is producing roaches, which he already is because he was planning to attack, actually, Bunny's build doesn't work. And Bunny is like, oh yeah, the queens are in the front. I'm gonna just jump on top of them. Oh shit, that's a lot of roaches. He is actually not doing so poorly in this battle right now. Dark actually could have microed his queens away, but regardless, there are more reinforcements coming out for the Zerg player, and actually SCV is already going down back on Bunny's side of the map. Unless these Hellbats can get up to the drone line, this will not be equal damage done. Dark is continuing to reinforce. It really is quite crappy that he lost those 2 queens, because this medevac should be dead. Bunny is going to respond to the roach sites with a Banshee, which is definitely the best play at this point. Dark had a pretty decent setup, but actually maybe it was a little too cavalier. I say the queens could have pulled back. Obviously, they were being slowed, so it's not as easy as that sounds. But I don't know. I wonder if he could have bought some more time, consolidated his actual army units, and then just taken out the rest of the army. Bunny has a Banshee, 2 Marauders, and 3 Hellbats, and that's not too terrible against what Dark has, guys. Dark obviously going to try and commit to this attack and hope to find Bunny in a weak spot, but I'm not sure that he did. These are chonky units. At the end of the day, it's at least going to take a while for Dark to actually tear them down, especially with the medevac healing, which gives further time for more Marauders and more Banshees. Guys, Dark might actually get out 4th in GSL. He might lose this group completely, utterly, and entirely. And Bunny's trying to prove me wrong about all my biases. He's like, 2 bases doesn't work, I'll show you. Hellbat Marauder doesn't work, I'll show you. I have been shown. Dark not one to give up on a game, though, especially because he has so many games under his belt in which he has made a successful 100% comeback. No doubt about it, everyone agrees it's a comeback. So he will try, but he, despite killing 5 SCVs, he obviously cut his own drone production for a very long time. So he's only ahead by 4 right now. That's abysmal. That's terrible. That's only 1 mule made up for, and there's 2 mules. 3rd CC is also done, so there's actually 3 mules. Barracks production is now on the way. Bunny's going to be able to go into some medevac drops pretty freaking soon. And 2 Banshees are even having some fun. Dark forced to build Spore Crawlers. That's 3 less drones. And he is in a lot of trouble. Ah, Ravager. out like that. Oh, no. Things are getting worse. No queens available, so the Spore Crawler range doesn't quite cover the gases. A good split on the Banshees. He realized he was kind of in a dangerous area. One Banshee will survive. Second one will die. Something going right for Dark. But he knows he has so much more to make up for. Bunny's third CC has landed. He is still only behind by 6 workers right now, which is not enough for Dark. He's not making up for 3 mules. And we even have drops continuing, not with the typical Terran army. It's the leftovers of the defense, but still, they are continuing. Dark is going to have a hell of a time actually making a comeback happen here. He could still do it, but he definitely needs to be adding on spellcasters. It's really the best thing to get a comeback going. He is going into 1-1-4. His roaches not going to try and go into Baneling by the looks of things, so I do anticipate Infestation Pit very soon. Bunny, obviously, just going into the Terran thing. Tank Spy, all the good stuff. 1-1 upgrades as well. Faster than Dark's, understandably. And also getting a fairly fast +1 tank upgrade. There's the Infestation Pit, and there is the Burrow. 2 things that have always been the best comeback makers. Yeah. Burrowed Banelings people love to talk about, but let's be real, they're not really all that often there for the comeback. There's the famous games where they were, but I would say more often it has been Infestors. Not because Infestors Imba. A long time ago they were, but no, just because they can work very well with the Ravager composition, and they're great time buyers. So it's not just direct fights that often go their way, because I would say maybe it even doesn't. If you're really making a comeback happen, a direct fight with Fungal Roach Ravager is actually probably not what you're looking for. It's the time buying. It's the fungal, okay, I gotta wait through this. It's the fungal, gotta wait through this. Oh, it's Corrosive Bile, I gotta split against it. Yeah, Metadeck is very weak. Metadeck is very weak. But obviously we're also talking about a meta now in which people are apparently concerned about the Infestor Burrows, and Serral has been making them look quite overpowered. They've always been strong. You know, before the Infestor was even changed to have automatic fungal in the last patch, I thought that Dark was already using them really, really well. Better than everyone else. Infestors have been scanned, by the way. I think they only with this scan. But now Bunny knows if he was paying attention. 20 army supply lead for Bunny. 4 tanks in tow, even a Banshee here to be annoying. Banelings were actually added on, and this can cause some explosiveness, right? And cause some difference in how you expect the engagement to go, especially if, obviously, the army is fungaled. But without cervical hooks, they're not as scary, and honestly, without a bigger number, they're not maybe as scary. Big ol' Ling run by, though. And actually, Dark committed so much more to Lings. He has 70+ Lings. This is a really big run by, with Burrow to be so super obnoxious. Viper's going to be able to come out at this point. This is the crucial time buying. Not by the Fungals and the Ravagers, but by the run by. Pretty good Fungal right there. And with the Vipers, you can all start picking away at this. I don't think a big, just army swarm is going to work out against Bunny's positioning, but picking away at the tanks via abducts could be very useful. Morling run-bys continuing to distract Bunny, as Bunny is very slowly pushing into this. He knows he will eventually have a chokehold on Dark as the tanks position forward, but he wants to be careful not to get too overeager. Banshee focus firing, and Infestor will actually get the kill. Fungal's not really hitting anything important right now. Things getting extremely awkward. Bunny at least denied his 4th base, but has cleared up most of the run-bys. He is down now 13 workers, but Dark could lose his hatchery, and this hatchery ain't gonna do very much anytime soon. Another hatchery to the top left is hoping to replace the economy for Dark as he tries to maximize the army potential here. And to do so, he does need to get maxed out first, and he does need the Vipers to get juiced up, which I believe they're doing in the main base as we speak. 11 more SCVs apparently went down as 3rd CC is no longer mining. Baneling's also prepared to take care of it, and Dark might be making this comeback happen. The tanks, though, still so freaking powerful. Where are those Vipers? They would love to get a couple of abducts right here. They are not being controlled at this current time. Bunny, I guess, being distracted alongside Dark, who did actually get the Banelings to pop off. I'm not sure on what. I think they just killed the tank. I think they literally popped off on a tank. Blinding Clouds come down! Oh my good lord. The Marines do evacuate away from the Zerg army, so they will survive despite the Blinding Clouds, which can push them forward into the Banelings. No, there wasn't a Blinding Cloud that forced that. Yeah, Bunny was just late to pulling back. Oh my good lord. Oh, this is a very, very close engagement. Very close game. Bunny down 23 workers, but with superior upgrades and superior army supply, technically, I guess. His army type has a lot of potential. His 4th CC can finally get to mining as he comes back home to clear up all of this mess. 3rd CC back to mining as well. Dark did have that 4th base finish, and the 6th actually surprisingly never got killed. Now will get killed. That's probably how it should be. Dark prioritizing the Vipers first and foremost from the Hive. Makes a ton of sense, but now also affording his +3 Carapace and Adrenal Glands, his +2 melee as well, reestablishing his old 4th, new 5th, and starting to get his defenses set up against the drops as well. Things kind of resets. Dark in a comfortable supply lead for someone who still has a lot of roaches, right? So he is inflated. Bunny needs to get to a higher SCV count, I think, feel very comfortable moving on to a late game. Like, he might be out of minerals in his main and natural, so he's actually mining pretty correctly with 48 SCVs, but kind of for all intents and purposes, he's you know, kind of all in still. He's not in a position in which we would see a lot of other Terran players get to 4 bases, then slap down a 5th, then as their 5th kind of gets situated, they have a 6th, 7th, and 8th all at once, a bunch of orbitals, tons of late game macro. I mean, Bunny's... what do they say? Fist to mouth? There we go. Hand to mouth? Fist? Why would fist mouth? It's hand to mouth? Whatever it is. He is working off of every base that he gets, one at a time. One day at a time for Bunny. Which, with Dark getting back up to now almost 6 bases with this middle base, Richfest being Geyser, it's not a good sign. Bunny is effectively all in, I suppose. Paycheck to paycheck is, yeah, that's an easier one to remember. And like an all-in can still work. The Terran army can still win with its, you know, final hurrah down the middle of the map as it loses its economy back at home. But it just is a very dangerous way to play, especially as that puts the timer on the Terran. You know, they're the ones that have to decide to run onto creep, as they know that they're on a timer. Maybe Bunny is planning on taking a base. He is situating his army in a way that looks like he's planning on taking this base, but I guess it also is kind of situating in a way that's leapfrogging forward. Yeah, he's just leapfrogging forward. Leapfrogging forward with tanks and missile turrets, because he knows the threat of the Shark Fester is around. 3rd base is going to be under attack by now what are Cracklings, and that is not a big enough army. Friendly fire even more so helping Dark, it feels. Army does return home, but that is not a huge investment from Dark to get the damage done, as well as the army to return home. Dark now has even more time to really plan his engagement. That is inevitable. He's trying to get to ultras at this point, but they don't have chitinous plating yet. Not nearly as confident in the sticky position of the Terran when they have the tank siege up here when it comes to the Zerg having spellcasters. It's still a good position, of course, but not as confident as I was earlier on when those Vipers weren't quite out yet, when the Baneling number was still kind of building, and clearly Dark was on the ropes. Dark looks like he's on the ropes, I guess, because the army is so close to his base, but in reality, this is just like a nice way to, I guess, size up your opponent. You could mess it up. The Zerg player could absolutely take a bad fight, but there's a lot of time to size up your opponent, decide if you want to go run by, base trade, all in, swarm them, get the Vipers in here, get the neural parasite set up, like whatever you want to do. Not neural parasite, fungal. And Dark has decided to go for a bit of the swarm by the looks of things. Where the hell are the Vipers, though, is seemingly always my question. Ultra, what are you doing, man? What are you doing? Oh well. And also a big army once again going for that run by. More SCVs going down, and I think the main base will be broken this time because Banelings are involved. Bunny does take down the middle base of his opponents, but it's never fair. When a Terran player loses a base and the Zerg loses a base, I mean, literally, as far as the cost, it's not fair. But as far as the pacing of TVZ, it's not fair. And so, in this case, with Bunny losing access to 2 bases, albeit temporarily, it's not a good sign for him. Oh, that's army going down. That is army going down. Medivacs might survive. This one won't, but the other ones will. But that is, I mean, there's still so much bio. 20 SCVs also in total. Some more went down when I wasn't looking. Dark's been kind of comfortable. To be fair, he's still in a precarious position. He knows that he could mess this up by taking a bad engagement. Not being able to remax fast enough would be a major problem for him, as the army is literally on his doorstep. And then he also doesn't quite have that bank at which he would feel comfortable remaxing anyway. 2,000 would be a little more comforting. Is trying to make this as all-in as possible for Bunny, ensuring that Bunny isn't getting a 5th base behind this or a surprisingly large SCV force or anything like that. Making sure that this is going to be it. Parasitic bombs coming down once more. Decent micro. No. Okay, a lot of Medivacs will be going down, but actually the Banelings not making any connections. That's a lot of Terran force still left over. No fungals in sight. A lot of the infestors are trying to shark behind the army, but were caught by the missile turrets. But to be that aggressive on creep against someone who does have Banelings is always extremely dangerous. The Vipers are also getting rejuiced, and in this case, a Blinding Cloud could be devastating. That pushes the AI forward, or again, you don't even need it if Bunny is too late to pull back, and Dark pulls the trigger. Bunny not able to survive. So marine heavy as well. So he's having actually kind of some trouble. I guess it's a large army force, to be fair, but it's not really the force you would usually want against ultras. It's marauders and, of course, ghosts, which are never going to happen in this game. They did once against ultras. The blinding clouds come down on top of the tanks, as you would expect, and the bio force gets tucked into a corner. It will be able to lift as the Vipers are out of juice, but what is there to really play out here for Bunny? I thought Bunny had this game, man. I mean, I thought Dark had the defense of the Hellbat attack, and then that wasn't true. Then the counterattack was just a wet noodle. But Bunny not able to pull it through. That is that. Dark will 2-1 Bunny, and will advance to the decider match to face Classic. The last match of the day. Best of 3 PvZ. Starting on Alcyone. The bottom left it is Classic, and the top right it is Dark. So Dark did play out his EVP earlier today. It was quite a long one. Every game, I believe, over 20 minutes. At least 2 of them. And so he is pretty prepared for this. It would probably have been wise, I guess, of Classic to predict the winner's match to be a PvZ. In my opinion. But I don't think this was a group in general in which you could have just chosen a matchup to prepare for. So I don't think him or Dark has really been thinking a lot about facing each other until they were forced to face each other. But yeah, Classic hasn't played out a versus Zerg here today. So we saw that he had good TVZ. Good lord, good PvZ. Ay. Oh my god. We saw that he had good PvT. Good lord. And now he might have good PvZ. Jesus, that was too much brain power for such a simple statement. Anyway. But Dark is really quite warmed up for it. Now, he is facing a very different Protoss. To get my thoughts on track here. He is facing a very different Protoss. Stats is guaranteed, basically, to be the macro guy. Okay, he did a first game, kind of bamboozle a little bit, and that he was going for a 5-gate blink attack. Not really an all-in, but it's kind of dedicated. And that probably messed with Dark's plan. He was thinking, oh, it's stats, he's going to defend, I'm going to all-in this guy, it's going to be hilarious. It didn't really work out quite so well. But stats overall would be good to guess that he's going to be defensive. Not so much for Classic. I mean, Classic can play triple Oracle, but then he can also apparently play 20 Oracle. He's actually one of the guys I think of when I think of that mass Oracle phase we had 7 years ago. If you guys weren't around, it was so fun. It was so great. Literally, it was mass Oracle, 20, 30 plus Oracles, and it was a long time ago. Might have even been Heart of the Swarm. Because I remember it was played on, like, Merry-Go-Round or something. Anyways, Classic is actually the guy I think of that I don't know why him in particular, but I guess because he's always been kind of a funny Protoss player. He might have even been the one really pushing it, actually. That's digging down into the memory right there. Anywho, so he can obviously go into the 3 Oracle and then into Blink. He can do the Resonant Glaives opener, which we didn't see at all from stats. He can do, even I would say he could do a Dark Shrine opener, but that is really uncommon nowadays in this matchup. Probably even more common in PvT, actually. And he apparently can be a little favorable to skyrocketing up to that fleet beacon, something he's been showing a lot in PvT where it's a little more abnormal, but it'll just be a way of playing in this matchup. Dark should, well, in this game with the Stargate opener, we are looking at Dark to perhaps make the first interesting move, but that's not guaranteed actually with Classic. Either player can be one to throw out an odd number of units or an all-in or whatever it is. Dark is going to throw out 10 Lings on top of 4 that he already created, so that's enough to initiate a bit of a counter, try and get that third Nexus delayed a little. Because I think you can see that it's not a second Adept, so that's not what he's worried about. Yeah, he sees that it's a Stalker that is about to kill his Overlord. Ideally, these Lings race across the map, kill the Adept, and they're there to help the Overlord survive against the Stalker. That's exactly what Dark is hoping for. Or just get in the main base. Alright, it's only like 12 Lings, though. Oh, he's gonna save the Overlord! Oh my god, he saved it. He kills the Stalker. He gets into the main for a little bit of a scout. It's a very basic bitch Protoss build, but still. That worked out exactly as planned. Exactly. And he's also gonna get the third Nexus cancel. Wonderful start for Dark, who invested again into about 14 Lings there. 14 Lings exactly. I would say you got your money's worth, particularly because of that third Nexus cancel. Without that, maybe it's a lot more questionable, actually. But with the third base cancel, that is so freaking annoying. The Oracles obviously are kept at home as well, so they're not trying to harass at all, and Dark can freely drone, even delay his Spore Crawlers a little bit more if he wanted to, I guess. I feel it's very good for Dark. Certainly gets him into the right mood. It's a real good mood setter. The Oracles will finally fly across the map as 2 Adepts were warped in to properly defend the third, but that's still an okay number of Lings, honestly. I would say it's an okay number to sack on the third Nexus without the Oracle. Then maybe the Adepts can't kill the Lings fast enough, but yeah, that's a proper third base defense, that is. 2 Adepts, an Oracle, and a third to warp in. Yeah, that's proper. Oracle that went on the offense actually almost died, so apparently didn't do anything. 0 kills, 0 kills. 3 kills, actually. A couple of those Lings, though. Yep, no drones killed. Dark adding on an Evolution Chamber first, then a Roach Warren. Signs to a later stage of the game, anyway. And Classic. Classic actually never added on a Twilight Council. He went Robo and Forge first. And Robotics Bay coming down very quickly as well. What is Dark's plan here? Oh, the Adepts got cornered. I didn't even realize that Classic had sent, well, most of his Adepts out in the forefront. 5 of them completely denied from doing damage. Only 1 drone lost so far. A much more awkward game for Classic, but he is moving on, moving on. Getting to Colossus, in a blink. That's why the Council now gets slapped down. And for me, I'm just watching Dark and ready for him to pounce, right? For him to make all his roaches. And it might just be literally Ling Roach Ravager. No Baneling Nest as of yet, anyway. Infestation Pit comes down. Okay. I would usually have never thought of Swarm Host ever, but we did see him play Swarm Host earlier on. Overseer is going to scout that it is a Robo. Colossus charge, actually, not Stalkers. Even though some Stalkers were made, that might have been a little deceiving, but obviously also to kill the Overseer. Infestation Pit going to go into a Hive, actually, and that is the more predictable thing. And the Hydralisk Den is on the way to then go into the Lurker Den. We got ourselves some late game here. This Classic adds on his Fleet Beacon and Stargates. Dark not going to make any aggressive moves in the mid-game. He's not going to max out in the mid-game and try and engage upon Classic's 4th base. He is going to Lurkers, so it's going to actually look very similar to our Stats versus Dark series. Except Classic's way of getting into the late game is obviously different. Classic went into the Oracle charge, or Oracle Colossus and then charge, I guess, whereas Stats was doing a lot of blink openers. Very quickly into Storm after that. And I'm not sure if I'm physically ready for another 60-minute PvZ, guys. I'm gonna be real with you. If PvZ could stop being the most likely matchup to go 20 minutes, that'd be great. Alright, carriers are on the way, lurkers are the goal, and that is going to be probably at least a 6 base for a 7 base scenario, I think. Or a 5 base for 7 base, I think. Yeah, that one. Yeah, for sure. A little bit of a move out from Classic, but it's fake. It's totally fake, man. I mean, he is pushing out, but it's like, what even really for? What are you gonna do? Nothing. Gonna abuse the heck out of this stupid Zelnaga. Alcyone Zelnaga really is the most annoying place. If these were traversable, it would not be nearly as annoying, but them being blockers is... Anyhow. Nidusworm, because Dark loves Nidusworms and Lurkers. He might get to it a little bit later in some games, but he does get to it. The prediction from both players is probably spot on. Dark is probably predicting Classic to be adding on the Stargate units. Classic probably predicting Dark to be going into those Lurkers, although he doesn't actually know. I mean, it could be Broodlords, but just the way that Dark's been playing today, he was able to witness those games versus Stats, actually. He's just, you know, well, he's at this PC practicing is what he is, but would be wise of him to have turned around and been like, oh. And Dark did not go into any fast Greater Spire outside of Site Delta, which that lost in the game anyway. So. Fifth will be temporarily denied, but Classic is guaranteed to get it, I think, in this type of game. Dark is mostly setting up a appetizer to the entrees, I like to say. It's the front line attack, and then the Nidusworm's gonna come in, then more Lurkers are gonna come in, then more upgrades are gonna come in, and then you're really gonna be talking about the meat and potatoes of the PvZ. The Nidusworm is already halfway done, so that's gonna be able to spill forth at least a couple of units. And Dark also looks to deny yet another 5th base over to the far right this time. Nidusworm has nothing in it, but the carriers are distracted. And Dark's frontline army has gotten to Classic's natural without being scouted whatsoever. Not the ideal scenario. Classic is trying to respond lickety-split. Oracles do get a good revelation, but it is so freaking awkward here. And that's not a lot of Hydras, and that is 4 carriers, and I think that maybe the lack of anti-air will ultimately be why Classic holds. Maybe, I don't know, man. Oh god, I don't know, the revelation... Well, it didn't matter, I guess. Like, those were still visible to the Protoss army, but it didn't look like it. That Protoss army just got slaughtered trying to respond. I mean, it's recoverable damage, but that was indeed awkward. It would have been absolutely devastating if Dark had somehow also magically had 20 more Hydras there to kill the Interceptors, but that would have been a bit much to ask for. Lurkers getting back into the natural will at least find the High Templars. Take damage from the storm but not be killed. They find both Robos as well. Both were on the front there in the natural. Cybernex 4 went down too, obviously, and so you have a very big reset. There are no Robos to produce Immortals or Disruptors or Observers. Or Observers probably the most critical thing. Although the Oracles are still alive, thank goodness. Until that Cybernex score is done, and then until the Robo is done. Classic was denied his 5th base yet again to the bottom right, and so is trying the 3rd time to get it into the gold base. He's tried every base so far. None of them have worked. Let's see if the gold works any better. Meanwhile, Dark did take up to 6 bases with his own gold, now also adding on static defense. He has gotten into the position he likes to be in, apparently also able to add all the additional technology should he want to add anything, such as Ultras or a Greater Spire. But like I said, it is recoverable damage that Classic took. You know, it's always scary when you get totally blindsided by the engagement, but he did have an almost maxed out army, and it was close enough. It's not like his main and natural got destroyed. That, yeah, he can recover. You just can't let that happen 5 times. And a more carrier-focused army than Stats ever showed. I think Stats got up to maybe a maximum of 6 carriers, but oftentimes it was 4. This time, this Protoss going up to 10. +2 Interceptor coming out. Well, now it's at least starting. Let's see, 3-2, sorry, my bad, on the Hydras. There's so many upgrades on the way. There's so many buildings being added on. They are so getting situated to play a 25-minute game. Thanks, guys. It is what it is. Can't blame anyone. Both Robos. Now in the back of the natural. Would have been vulnerable if this had any lurkers in it, which now it does. But, there you go, I was going to say. He saw that stasis trap, but there you go. Oh, it's so many lurkers. Oh, it's so many lurkers. Oh my god, they're actually confused. They're so confused right now. But those Robos, if they're targeted, they will die. Oh yeah, they're dead. And one carrier will not kill as many lurkers very quickly. And Dark even realizing it. He's like, you're really not sending your army back? You're really not sending your army back? You're really not sending your army back? Well, I'm just going to stay here. Actually, kind of a bit silly. Nidus Storm number 2 popping up. Which, actually wasn't so silly. Oh no. He didn't realize that he had to evacuate before his Nidus Storms died. Well, whoopsie is right. 13 lurkers die overall in the game. Most of them right there. When he could have run away. But I guess, like, I didn't notice, actually, until the very last second. And so Dark didn't either. But actually very smart of Classic to... That was almost a bait. And if that was a bait, that's pretty freaking cool. He constantly showed one carrier, oh, I'm not responding, which initially I think he just legitimately wasn't. But then eventually he was like, I'll just focus the Nidus and then show up with all my carriers. He lulled Dark into a false sense of security. That was pretty cool. More lurkers are being rebuilt, of course. It took a very long time, after all, and so Dark has the economy, had the bank, and rebuilds pretty freaking quickly, but that was a great loss of life. This is a far more conservative approach to things. Fucking love the Queen coming out, man. Building a creep tumor. Hell yeah. Only one observer still is a little concerning, but again, both oracles remain alive. Very good control from Classic thus far. And there's a lot of carriers, man. It's just such a different way for the Protoss to play late game. You know, I was talking a lot about how Classic would be more aggressive than Stats, but actually the big difference is how their late game composition looks. Stark is forced to react to it by building more Corruptors than ever in his first PvZ, but he did so at a very appropriate time. And the Microbial Shroud coming in to help out with the Hydras that were there, they're all just dead now, was just enough, by the looks of things, to make it hold. 6 carriers left over, lots of Interceptors, yes, but you know that more Hydras are on the way, or more Corruptors, whatever it is. And it is going to be more Corruptors. 11 more to make a total of 23 that will be able to one-shot the carriers, I think. They do have +1 attack on them, and the carriers don't get armor upgrades particularly quickly, so they're only working off a shield. Nidus Run, by the way, still going strong, apparently. I guess the Queen died? Or went back? She went back. This Nexus, it's not the most important thing to save as far as the mining goes, but it is important as far as building the wall to stop the main from being harassed. It's important to clear up any more vision so that this doesn't continue to leapfrog forward with more Nidus Worms, more Creep Tumors, more Lurkers. You do usually want to clear this up. Oh, I guess like the studio had some internet problems or something today. Classic trying to take it one step at a time, I suppose. Finally deals with the natural. Or does he? Oh my god. That one carrier is forced to be recalled as the Corruptors just saunter their way in. La-di-da-di-da. They find a mothership. And they might even be able to tackle the carriers, honestly. There's no storms as of yet here, but Dark knows they're on the way, and his choice is to get the heck out of there, or at least go back to the Lurker, which is on the lineup of the High Templars. Focus fire! Oh, it's so freaking scary. Classic did realize that was happening and pulled his High Templars just out of range. Whew, okay. Yeah, Classic was just... I don't blame him for not anticipating all the Corruptors to suddenly appear. But that was another reason as to why you would clean that up, right? That is scouting information to the Zerg player. They can see that you're trying to respond to that with only a single unit, that nothing's back there at home. Oh boy, Classic. Getting back into position as fast as he possibly can, but still not fast enough. That's 16 lurkers, not all firing at once, but they are killing the Nexus. The carrier kind of caught off there. I mean, these corruptors are injured, and they absolutely have to be wary of the storms, but they've got some decent upgrades at 2-2 versus the +2 of Classic. I guess 2-2 shields. And so they are trying to snipe whatever they can. Classic finally trying to get something done on Dark side of the map. It has been a very long time since he's gotten anything done, anything positive happening for him. The most positive thing for Classic has been some of the cool maneuvers while he's defending, like killing that Nidus Worm. That's cool and all, and keeping your head above water is great, but he's not thriving. And the more that he doesn't thrive here, the more that Dark can think through how he wants to tackle the late game Protoss army, which can be a one-punch army. It can still win. But now he can add on more upgrades, more corruptors, try and take the engagements on Classic side of the map so that he has time to reinforce in case he takes a bad engagement, build more of a bank, get Neural Parasite, and plan out his spellcaster abilities. Dark is in control, but it is not easy to kill a guy. Nidus Worm in the main going to be denied. I mean, Dark is looking for any opportunity to sneak something in, because again, scouting, distraction, and the chance to overwhelm someone who is maybe going to under-defend. If 50 lings pop out of here, they can kill all these pylons in a blink of an eye, as they are cracklings. Banelings really pulling on in here. It's going to be gas for minerals, so it's not necessarily effective, but that's so much stack defense that has been taken out of the equation, and now a much more vulnerable base. And actually, all the probes died anyway. Okay. Well. Point still stands. It was more vulnerable. But I think it was worth it. There's a 7,000 resource difference after that, but that is, I think, pretty manageable for a ZVP. Nice abduct on a Tempest when Classic wasn't looking. And that is how Classic back down to about 4 base mining. It's not the worst, but it's actually only 2 base. Gold is denied by a lurker, and the other 4th is not up and running yet. Classic does seem to be doing the hands, thrown up in the air thing. Let's just go for it. Let's hope that he can't defend the main army. Maybe he's right about that. We shall see. Dark is maxed out. 16 lurkers, 18 corruptors. Good upgrades all around. For both Zerg and Protoss, Neural Parasite could come into effect. Dark is starting to lose out on his own mining bases. He doesn't have too many more after these are killed. Just the gold, which is mining out. And he never took the right side either, so keep that in mind. Dark's bank is bigger, but he might take a worse trade against the Protoss army, which decides to recall. So Classic isn't quite so frustrated as just all in right now. He is going to finally get back to mining on his gold with his 35 probes. 1.5 base mining, basically. And add on a couple more carriers as well, really trying to get to the perfect army possible. In his eyes. Clearly we have different ways of playing out the very late game PvZ. Stats wasn't just not going for a lot of carriers because he thinks they're a terrible unit, but he was also playing a far more mobile, multi-pronged, chipping away type style against Dark, where this is more of like just like bashing your heads against each other. And so we'll see if Classic has the better endgame. And Stats did end up winning 2-1 after all, but we'll see if Classic is even better than that. Cracklings doing their job, just even if they die, you know, it's so cheap. they do so much damage. Classic needs that investment of those 10 cannons and a shield battery to stop the Ling run-bys from doing all the damage. Killing the probes, killing Nexus, killing the reinforcements. Greater Spire is just only now on the way? Okay, I assume that was done. And there was just no reason to build Broodlords quite yet. I mean, you can obviously go into a mass late game air army. Broodlord, Corruptor, Viper, and Fester, right? But the Broodlords sometimes aren't the right play. I mean, you know, Very much, I would not talk about this with any form of authority. Leave it to the ZDPs. People who play them. Oh, that's a good parasitic bomb. I think both Vipers ended up surviving. That's a very good parasitic bomb. Hello? The mothership did not micro away from the carriers. Now all of the shields are gone from most of the carriers here. Transfuse is coming in to patch up the Corruptors, now at a count of 31. What I was going to say is that Lurkers can oftentimes do the job of, like, Brute Lords, you know, basically killing the things on the ground. And those things are generally High Templars, but also Archons, which you try to avoid with the Corruptor ball, but doesn't always work out. Neural Parasite just to basically abduct the carrier, if you will. You could also try and get the feedback on the High Templar, Neural Parasite High Templar, and feedback the rest of them. That would be really cool. And Dark has done that before, but we are on full-on all-in territory. Classic has given up his main base, his production, additional upgrade as well, going to fail before the main fight happens. And Dark is just trying to get the best possible engagement, and that usually means picking off units before you really do pull the trigger. And in fact, it's not even really Dark who's necessarily going to pull the trigger as much as he's hoping that Classic will run into his Lurker army. Classic not going to make that mistake as of yet, but eventually it's not a mistake. It's eventually just it's an eventuality. Like, he has to do something because he is not going to be able to win this game off of macro. So he is the one that's forced to run around, and eventually that run-around game will be head-to-head Protoss army versus Zerg army. Which one wins? That's a lot of High Templars, 9 of them. Getting all the feedbacks, a lot on Overseers. That's always a problem for the Protoss players, but I think all of the Spellcasters were also affected. We're talking about one Oracle, by the way. And that Oracle is really important. The Observer can't go close enough to the army to do what it needs to do. The Oracle can barely get that Revelation off or escaping. Woohoo! Classic has to be worried about losing an actual base race, guys. Dark's gonna go for it. I'm not sure that he has to. Might be the more dangerous way to play, but as he spreads his Corruptors out from the Storm's damage and the Archons are actually distracted by the Lurkers, it does look like Dark just had enough. It's always so scary to make that decision against the Protoss ball, but it was the correct decision, I think. There's always that weird problem with his 19 Corruptors and no ground army, but 2 Lurkers are alive, and I don't see any vision left over. Classic has no Oracle, no Observer, and no way to deal with the Lurkers other than to circumvent them. And that means that he can't kill a base if they're defending it. Plus, as I was saying, we have to worry about the base race, and the Corruptors can still pee on buildings. Or turn into Broodlords, because Dark had a humongous bank, and I forgot about that. Yep, that also works. 17 Broodlords will shoot down. And will kill the rest of the Protoss army. However way you slice it. Dark has many ways to win this game. That's not a pretty sight for Classic. Well, maybe the guy had no money. Yeah, no. Nope, that is it. Dark, after 25.5 minutes, is gonna win game 1 of his second PvZ series. Dark now up 1-0 onto Oceanborn. Top left Dark, bottom right Classic. Oof. Classic been on Twisted Minds. Dark's on Talon Esports now, I believe. We've actually had so many new teams. Well, established teams, but new to StarCraft come in. And it would be nice for his team if he could go ahead and get farther on in this GSL. As I was saying in the earlier series, whatever series it was, it's been almost 4 hours of casting. That, you know, really all the eyes are on the Esports World Cup. And you get to the Esports World Cup by performing well in all of these tournaments. GSL, the European, North American regionals, Asia regionals, Dallas. You get better seeding the better you do leading up to all these events. Sure. But really, you know, if you're at a comfortable spot points-wise, or you literally already have a seed like Clement Serrell do, you know, if you lose a GSL, you know, if Dark had a seed to Esports World Cup, and then you lost GSL right off the bat, you'd live. You'd be okay. I think it's still kind of a prestigious tournament, but the prize pool is still actually very, very low, and you can support it, support the Korean scene, by supporting GSL, patreon.com/GSL. But it is kind of low, even with the support from the people, and the Esports World Cup is really what you're eyeing. And that's probably why his team picked him up as well. And it sounds like he is at least going to be able to play StarCraft 2 until that point. And then after the Esports World Cup, Dark will probably have to retire, which will be very, very sad. He hasn't been around since the very beginning of StarCraft 2, but he's going on 12 years of being a professional StarCraft 2 player. That's like a third of my life. Anyway, emotions, oh no. We do have a normal opener so far, so we can express our emotions if you guys really want to. We can have a heart-to-heart. So many of the Korean players aging out. Some of them returning, though, such as Classic. Not gonna let old age discourage him. He's like 28 or something. Sorry, I'm running out of things to say about PvZ, honestly. They're rather passive, and they've been rather similar. Dark did try and change it up. This is another reason why I like Dark, you know? He's one to go for the early attacks, the early aggression, give the casters something to talk about after casting 9 games in a row that go very similar to each other. But ZombieGrub, I bet a professional player would have noticed the slight intricacy of a later drone versus an earlier drone. Okay, whatever. Alright. Am I gonna be at Dallas? I assume so. There's really no reason not to hire me, I think. Yeah, whatever, nerd. Like, whatever, pro gamer. Anyway. And Tarek is once again getting something to talk about. Last game, he had a very effective opener. I actually forgot about it, because it was such a long game. Shit. But he had a very effective opener. He made Lings, which isn't drones. That's always the conundrum for a Zerg player. But it got into the main. It killed a Stalker. It saved an Overlord. It canceled a Nexus. Like, that's pretty freaking good. And so I think he's looking for the same type of success. You think Classic would be a little more wary against it, though, and he already is, basically. So he's not opting for a Stalker anyway. This isn't a map that has a pervert pillar in which you know you can kind of get a guaranteed Overlord kill. So he built 2 Adepts, and so they will also stay at home, one almost getting caught being too far forward. And in this case, Dark's opener is actually useless. Dark just wasted larva and minerals on Lings, not drones. And you can't even really go, well, he has map control. No, not really. There's not much else that Protoss will be doing here. I guess they could see if it was going to be a larger Adept attack. So that, you know, there's that. But the Oracles are going to fly out now. And really be the controllers of the area. Especially if there's no Spore Crawler. Dark going to lose drones after already kind of sacrificing drones to go for those Lings. That's a very dangerous direction for the Oracle, but that will escape. I don't know why Dark, who was never a particularly good Brood War player or very popular in Brood War, would participate in ASL, but we have some Brood War elitists who think that it's God's gift to Earth, so... Okay. Sorry, YouTube, you're gonna be hearing more Twitch chat commentary, as I've had my fill of PvZ, honestly. But yeah, I mean, Dark's not a Brood War guy, it's funny. Rain is literally so good at Brood War, and had such a short stint in StarCraft 2, actually, in the grand scheme of things. TY, obviously, very famous as Baby in Brood War. Of course, he would have a fan group waiting for him if he ever returned. Dark? No. Dark came in on Slayers in 2012. I'm sure he played Brood War because every Korean person did, but you could talk to a taxi driver in Korea, and they could be like a 60-year-old taxi driver, you know, so kind of old. And if you talked about Brood War, they would actually know what you were talking about. And they might have even played it. You know, there's a decent chance. Which is always the neat thing. But it's gone from 10 years ago talking to a Korean person and saying, like, I know Brood War, I know StarCraft 2, and then being like, oh, wow, you know StarCraft? Do you know Korea? They're, like, shocked you know about their country. To, oh, wow, you still play that game? Like, they have the same exact response as everyone else. It's so sad. 3-base Fleet Beacon. Classic, just jumping over the interesting aspects, I swear. No, sorry, Classic. Going into a 4th base, going into the fast Fleet Beacon. I said that he does this in the first game, and it is here. Very, very quickly into the capital ships. Overseer's going to see that, though, as it happened. Uh-oh. Well, it should see that as it's happening. I mean, it's basically the last game, actually. Isn't it? Yeah, it is. Maybe this is faster, but in the grand scheme of things, doesn't matter. It's 4-base Fleet Beacon after Colossus in charge. This is what he did last game. Dark is doing something different, though. Dark's gone for +1 melee, first of all, but then he also has added on a Spire in a very tricky location, hoping that the Oracle will never, ever see it. And it has not. So the Spire coming out this fast, like, in my experience, okay, as a player, which means absolutely nothing, the faster Spire seems like such a great thing to have against someone who went faster Fleet Beacon, right? Like, you're matching the pace of the game. There are other options you can do as a Zerg player. You can, go for an all-in off roaches, and it still can kind of work, actually, because the carriers don't kill them fast enough. You can obviously go into Hydras, which is a lot what Dark does. But then there's obviously just like, oh, well, I already have Corruptors, and Corruptors are what you make against capital ships. Big thumbs up. But actually, in my experience, it's never that easy. Static defense plays a huge part. Corruptors are so freaking expensive that even if it's been a very non-chaotic game and you've gotten up to 80 drones, 5 bases, no problem, you still don't really have the... It's not a one-up situation. You didn't one-up the Protoss player by getting to Aspire and Corruptors this fast. You actually just match them, even though you produce X amount of army at a time and Protoss produce 2 carriers at a time, So I think that's also been true in the professional games that we've seen it, but it is one of the less likely things to happen, just because generally that Spire does come in after a period of Ling Bailing attacks, Roach Hydra attacks, or Roach or Hydra attacks, sorry. Whatever it is, but... This is one of those examples of it happening. Dark did make Corruptors first, tried to go in for a Shark attack, just like a surprise gotcha. Didn't work, and now he's gone to Mutas. Which I have my doubts about. It's very different, it's very interesting. But going into Mass Muta against someone who's building carriers, I mean, if the numbers work, if you have a lot more stuff, then anything can work. But we're again going back to, I think, a major problem, which is that it's a defensive Protoss player. If Dark was doing or Classic was doing a very, very fast, like, almost 2-base into 3-base Fleet Beacon, then they move out with the first 2 carriers, because they're like, haha, gotcha. And if you had Mutas, and they didn't have a recall, like, we've seen that. Hero was doing that kind of thing for a little while. And so it's a little more awkward, but the static defense really negates the dangerous part, I think, of the mass air here. Because 10 probes killed in a run-by is not... I'm not even going to talk about it. It's like, what is that? And he has so many mutas. I wasn't even just 7 mutas to go for a run-by. He's got up to 26 mutas. I'm pretty sure this doesn't work. Overcharged a little late, actually. So 1 carrier does go down. The only thing that was missing right there were Archons, though. I mean, if there were just 2 Archons in the actual battle, that is the dumbest thing ever. Sorry, Dark. I'm getting feistier in my commentary as well. But even without the Archons, it wasn't particularly pretty. And now there are Archons, so... And also Classic now realizes, like, really? That's what you're doing? So he's also adding in Phoenix. And they're about to have +1. Dark already has +1, to be fair, but that's, I don't think, overpowers the quality of the Protoss army. I do like the Baneling edition. One thing that, is always a fear for Protoss players is getting sucked into the idea that a Zerg player is all air or all ground, and then getting tech swap-a-rood. So there's always that. And Dark is finally adding on his Hive. Considering the pace at which Classic set the late game capital ships, this is actually a very late Hive. Corruptors and Mutas, I mean, obviously we talk about Corruptor Muta versus pure Phoenix, and there's a logic to that. It's obviously not pure Phoenix. The Phoenix also already have a range. Carriers here to help. No Archons, though. Played the runaround game and got into the main where the carriers were more vulnerable. Ultimately, we see a humongous loss of Zerg life, though. And I still don't think that was really worth it. I can see some potential, you know, before I really just get accused of thinking Dark's being silly. I see some potential. I mean, I certainly don't think Dark's trolling in his final, you know, elimination match of GSL, but the potential, it doesn't even really seem all that high, actually. The point of which this happens, there's a lot of other things that happen in a lot of other scenarios, but this is more what I had hoped for, which is that the mass Baneling surprise would conquer the Protoss army. It has not, however. Just a couple of force fields helping out there. A couple of Colossus standing their ground. No Warp Prism, which is the most awkward thing about it, but I think that Classic is fine. Yeah, even though his supply doesn't look that great, he's actually winning the battle, and Dark is completely without a bank. So he's reinforcing with very subpar units across the engagement path. He doesn't have roach speed. Guys. He doesn't have roach speed, which you don't need for 16 Ravagers, I guess. But yeah, Classic handled that very well. He was, I guess, anticipating the Banelings. The force fields were great. The positioning of his army was great. And Dark is, as I said, producing kind of lower quality units. Ravagers are a bit better. In a situation where he is not rich. He doesn't just get to do this and then move on to whatever else is more expensive and far better. This is his army. This is what he depends on. Just one extra Viper being added in. And Classic, of course, wisely backs away with the expensive army that he still has able to keep alive. Those Archons, the Colossus, and the single carrier. Well, Dark gets a second chance in this game. His first tech choice didn't really do very much. Its strongest potential was in the Protoss finally moving out, and then Dark being able to surround and conquer with Banelings and Roaches. Which could have happened, for sure could have happened. Did not, though. And now, the Phoenix are having a field day. And now Dark is on that classic ZVP situation of low tech and ideally higher quantity, but not in this case, against the higher quality of Classic. These Phoenix are really just, they found a value. A lot of Ravagers being taken down before those Corruptors finally pop to safeguard them. And now the Corruptors need to be even higher in number as Classic has gone back into carriers, which Dark just having such a tough time affording these units. He is only on 5 bases mining, but keep in mind his first and his natural are both mined out almost. Ditto on the side of Classic. That was how many Ravagers killed in the Phoenix? Too freaking many. Too many. Lings do have +3, but no adrenal glands. He wasn't rich when his hive finally finished, and he needed all of the resources into army ASAP. So he might have even forgotten about it at this point. So +2 weapons on the Corruptors, but no armor on them. And the Interceptors are close to having their +2. Phoenix also getting all the pot shots in. Parasitic Bomb goes down, very effective against Phoenix, but that is not enough as we see the Archons just continuing to move forward. They do not care about the Ultras, apparently. They might have wanted to care, but the Carriers just won the Air War, so now the Carriers reign supreme. We got 8 Carriers, 60 Interceptors with +2 against 12 Corruptors popping out from all different directions without any armor upgrade. Recall on the Colossus was great for the defense of the Lings in his third. Might not be enough. These are +3. Nah, Shield Battery will save the day. So that is going to be enough. So Dark is going to be forced to tap out. It's a very different style, very different approach. Maybe Dark thought it would work, of course, sure, yeah. But then Dark also, I think, has expressed frustration at this stage of the game. Not because necessarily he believes it to be imbalanced, just that it's kind of annoying. And he has played already four games of a very, very similar type, where he tried to do something in the early game, like a Ling Queen all-in or a Roach Ravager bust or whatever. And then he was forced to play 25 minutes. And he might have been really trying to mix that up, but it didn't work. And so he might just have to go back to, well, what he's been doing, you know? Typical Zerg opener into Hydras and Lurkers. And the last game of the day, guaranteed. All tied up here in the decider match. In the bottom right, it is Dark. In the top left, we have Classic. Site Delta was the map where Dark showed off his attempted Broodlord style of play. So he didn't go into Lurkers, he went into Broodlords. And so he might do it again. I kind of went over the benefits last time and the downsides. And he never really got to use the full might of his Broodlord army to really just clobber around, you know, be the big baddie on the field. Stats did a really excellent job making sure the Broodlords ever felt comfortable moving out and just picked him apart. But Classic is playing a different style of late game, and I'm not sure he'll change it up based off of Dark maybe going into faster Broodlords. Anything can happen. Both players equally capable of, on their last life in a tournament, going for a cheese, going for an all-in, going for something really weird. Both of them very much capable of that. What does Zerg player do against upgraded range Phoenix? Well, if you're already going into Aspire, then you can go Corruptors. It's just that the problem was that it wasn't just Phoenix. If you go into Mutas against a ground Protoss, and then they go, oh shit, I need Phoenix, and they get ranged Phoenix, then you can go into Corruptors. And an armor upgrade does work really well against Phoenix. The problem was that wasn't a game that was ground Protoss, Mutas, Phoenix response. That was ground Protoss, but already into carriers. So it was a very different pacing, a very different composition of army that was being thrown out there. It's such a late timing, too. They also already had Archons, or just about to get to Archons. So, really what you'd say in that game is that you don't do anything against the Phoenix, the ranged Phoenix, except, like, you know, play out a late game PvZ. So Corruptors actually micro, they're actually in a big enough number because you didn't waste a lot of time trying to build a muta game, and you try and get some spells cast on them, like the Parasitic Bomb was very effective. But really, it's a very unique situation in that type of game. Everything that happened there, including the time in which the Phoenix bullied the Ravagers. That is not going to happen very often. But since we have a totally normal ZVP opener, I figure answering any questions is better than saying for the 6th time. Classic is going into a Stargate. And Dark is going into a third hatch. You can see why Wardy's taking a break. This kid does this every day for 6 hours. He's in Singapore right now. A place I would like to go to as well. I want to go to Singapore and Vietnam this year if I can afford it. Back in my day, we would just talk about nothing for the first 7 minutes of a PvZ. My voice is also starting to kind of go out, so I might just be more silent as we watch droning and more droning and more droning. Supply block! Dark's mechanics can falter for sure. And more droning and more droning. And a third base. Why Singapore? Crazy rich Asians. I knew nothing about Singapore before I watched that movie, I'm not gonna lie. Maynard had mentioned that it is like really fun. He goes there like often. You know, it's like the one place he doesn't mind going because it's kind of close to Australia, but that was still after I watched Crazy Rich Asians, so. Apparently, it's a place that's very good for staying for, like a few days. That's some place that you would spend weeks in. But I don't know, I haven't gone yet. But I also want to visit Vietnam. And I might have to skip going to Korea. Oh, what did you cancel? Oh shit, I should have been paying attention to that. That was a robo, wasn't it? That had to be a robo. His Twilight Council's actually done. Oh my god, it's something interesting. Oh my god, holy shit. Okay. Alright, so if that was a robo cancel, then Dark scouted a robo and thought, ah, okay, you're doing the exact same thing. Fast into the Colossus and the Robotics Bay, and then into the Fleet Beacon. Alright, that's how you're gonna play it. But then he cancels it because he was actually going to a Twilight Council in the main base, which is now producing Blink, which is also being, alongside a lot of gateways being produced. Oh my god, it's something different. So no Forge, and still kind of a late Twilight Council. This actually almost seems like it wasn't even a fake as much as it was an adaptation, but I didn't see exactly when he canceled that robo. Because the Blink could have been faster. Drones are going down as well to the Oracle, as well as that Spire being scouted, and Classic should be rubbing his chin right now and being like, well, if I could get my Blink attack in before that Spire's done, then he's going to have so many resources collected in something that doesn't help him. I might just win the game. And Dark might be thinking, this son of a gun is going to go into late game PvZ again. I swear to God, I'm going to kill myself. Anyways. One of them has a better plan here. Now, Classic's plan is about to be revealed, I swear. Hello? Oh no, the Lings just saw one stalker. That's very unfortunate. I really don't think he saw the extra stalkers. Did he see the gateways? He hasn't seen the gateways. Oh, no! Dark might be cheesed out of this game. So the Spire didn't end up being used, but I'm not sure that's because he figured out what Classic's doing. I think it might just be because he was scouted. He's like, okay, never mind, I'm not going to go for it, but... maybe he... Nope, he's getting a Visitation Mid as well. He's getting more drones. Oh, God. Oh, no. Not like this, Dark. Not like this. That's so many stalkers. Holy shit. Now, Dark didn't severely over-drone, but he has a lot of resources tied up in things that are not helpful right now. So many buildings, so many upgrades. And Classic has such a microable army. 8 gateways, pure stalker, no upgrades, no technology. He's going to cheese his way into the round of 8 of the GSL. And I do not blame him one iota. Not quite enough to one-shot a Ravager, apparently. Stasis Trap still helping. Pulsar Beam still helping in case Lings get a wraparound on the Stalkers. But honestly, the Stalker number is going to be so big that a Ling surround is unlikely. You'd have to have, well, I was going to say 50 Lings, and to be fair, Dark does have 50 Lings. Okay. But still. That is what the Oracles are for. Queen. Oh, that was a very dangerous blink because the Lings were looking to get either a surround or a run-by. Turns out it is a run-by. Third base could be under attack, only a single shield battery to stop them, but without those Lings on the front line, those are things that got an upgrade as well. It's +1 melee, not +1 missile. I don't know if the Ravagers can hold on, dude. That is 37 Stalkers, an aggressive blink forward, a last-second split away from most of the Corrosive Biles, and these Lings would have been better off back at home. They are killing probes, they are killing maybe the Zealots as well, but Dark is straight up losing the game, man. He did have to make a very tough decision. He knew that he was late to defending against this and that the Lings were not guaranteed to get us around to actually get on top of all these Stalkers and cause problems. They weren't guaranteed to do that, so he thought he'd go for a run-by. He thought he'd buy some time, but unfortunately, I think Classic Stalker count is just too big. They both lost a similar number of workers. The problem is that Dark can't collect another army. Classic has his army still. Ay, ay, ay. Classic playing mono battles, exactly. And you can see Dark doesn't really know exactly what to do. There was a 4th base that was on the way, actually. That was canceled, so Dark might have been rechecking that, but... Oh, he is up shit creek, man. He was not ready to handle this. Classic doing an excellent job bamboozling the poor Zerg, keeping him from scouting everything. I really think he would have gotten a stronger idea if he had seen the Stalkers. That at least would have prompted him to wonder if there was an attack on the way. Because it clearly would not have been the same style of play as the last couple of games, right? But then, even then, he might not have had enough information. He might have said, oh, okay, never mind, it's not Fast Colossus. I guess you changed into the Blink Stalkers. But that doesn't mean you went 8 Gateway, no Forge, Proxy Gate. But it at least would have been something a little bit more. And then I think Classic did a good job denying Overlords with that Phoenix that he built. And he probably made sure this gateway wasn't scouted somehow. Dark seems like he's getting a second chance at life, especially with some Infestors outs. The Infestation Pit died at the 3rd or the 4th, whatever it was, but after he built 4 at least. So that's something, and they are very good against Stalkers. It looks like Classic's plan here is to go into Stargate's Mass Oracle. I brought that up just for nostalgia's sake, Classic. What the hell, man? I can't believe he's gonna go Mass Oracle. Stark still has a Spire, too, actually. Of course, Classic's winning regardless of technology, but it's funny. Good fungal, good fungal. Dream Gland's almost done as well. A lot of Stalkers dying to a, you know, low number of Lings, I guess. It's just that even though that's a low number of Lings at 150 supply or 180 supply, Dark's at 116 supply, so 20 Lings is actually devastating to him. It is a fucking Mass Oracle. What the hell, man? Well, thank you for doing weird stuff, man. Always gotta appreciate Classic. This is actually so silly. 2 Infestors won't stop the Mass Oracle. 5 Mutas won't stop them from doing the damage before they die. Because this is something I weirdly enough have experience in with Classic. Classic has experience in, obviously. In an entirely different expansion, I'm pretty sure. But still. You think, well, Mass Oracle, why didn't this dumb Zergs just make a Spire unit? Dumbasses. Well, the Oracles would just fly away and recall and fly away and recall and then just like laser beam down a bunch of shit before they got recalled. And then they'd move over into, you know, actual capital ships at some point. So. Probably one of the least cool first Oracle run bys, but there we go. Now they're all clumped up. They can burn down a spore really quickly. And, you know, Dark doesn't really want to make any air units against it because he makes 5 Mutas to go deal with that. 5 Mutas don't help you against the Stalkers. Well, now it kind of feels like Classic is pushing Dark's face into the dirt, you know? Ending the game with Mass Oracle. No, Dark refuses. Can at least try and get one last punch in before being forced to tap out, because that is just too big of a Stalker army. Once again, an aggressive Blink forward, but no Lings in sight. Zealots trying to come in to help as well. Eventually they'll get there. They're trying. Alright, this is the most awkward fight ever. Corrosive Biles just hit so many Stalkers. Recall has to happen because Lings hit the 3rd base, and this is actually getting a little screwy as the Natural's also under attack, but Dark is just simply too far behind. And he still doesn't have a response to the Oracles, actually. It's just too much. But you can see how Dark have so many comebacks, man. If he wasn't so dead, this would have been an amazing opportunity for a comeback. But he was so dead. And he's still so dead. Even as these cracklings tear down Classic's economy. There's no way he wins, question mark. Hello? He kills a 3rd. He puts Classic on 18 workers. I mean, Dark's only on 30, but it is better. There's no way that Dark wins this game. I love that he attempts. And I love that the oracles are now useful for mass revelation because the lings are burrowing everywhere. The classic should realize, as I believe that he has, that like... Oh, maybe not, actually. He could realize that oh, the Vipers are found out. That's so unfortunate. That he just has to stay at home with, 10 Zealots and 2 Archons. And then the Lings can't really defeat that. And they kind of can, depending on the numbers, but... Classic keeps moving out, and he loses another Nexus. What the fuck? Dark is such a good comeback player, man. At this point, he might be thinking he'd win a base race. If he could get 40 Cracklings, which he does have, every single one of those Cracklings into the natural and the main, if he focus fired the Nexus so that there wasn't a recall, he could win off of a base race. How crazy would that be? But he's not going to do it, so he's going to be jumped upon. Classic finally getting his opportunity to strike. Just, whatever with these Lings, he's going to do it. He's going to win. Parasitic Bomb was crazy effective against the Oracles. They're all dead now. And if Dark hadn't gotten surrounded by the Protoss army and still had some units that were running away, I'd still be on this whole, base race thing. But he lost so many units to Classic jumping on top of him. Oh, you're gonna try. You're gonna try. Imagine if he had 10 more Roaches and 30 more Lings or something. Oh, you're gonna try. And now Classic can also base race, and Dark can't even build an Evolution Chamber. He can build 2 Extractors. But he didn't send any drones out. And Dark is actually gonna... I thought Dark might try and base race legitimately. Did he get recalled or something? Imagine if he had 150 more supply. Yeah, of course. I think it's more realistic he could have 5 more Roaches and 20 more Lings, alright? Nah, recall wasn't on cooldown. I guess he just assumed a recall would happen. And he's not wrong! He's not wrong. He was not going to snipe both Nexus in time. But, yeah, okay. GG's. Oh, man! That means both Protosses got out. My narrative. No. Well, I'm very sad for Dark. But Protoss fans should be very happy. Both Protosses in a group got outs into the round of 8s. Hot diggity dog. Time to complain on our StarCraft, for sure. All right. That's a nice twist. GSL still full of surprises, apparently. 14 years on. Hell yeah. Stats gets out first. Classic gets out second. How about that?